When lightning struck and the ground gave way, Evelyn Grant's world shattered in an instant. Thrown from her horse into a raging storm, injured and alone in the wilderness, she faced her darkest hour. Then he appeared, a mysterious cowboy on a black stallion, his voice cutting through the thunder with an impossible promise. "You'll ride again." But could a stranger's words heal more than just her broken body? Stay with me until the end of this journey, and comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels across the world. The storm had been building all afternoon, transforming the Big Sky country into something biblical and terrifying. Evelyn Grant had watched the clouds gather from the window of her father's study in town, dark towers of cumulus rising like ancient fortresses along the western horizon. She should have stayed. Her father had warned her, his weathered hand gripping her shoulder with that familiar mix of concern and resigned understanding that came from raising a daughter who refused to be tamed by common sense. "Evie, that system's moving fast. Wait it out here. Your old man isn't going anywhere." But the telegram had been specific. Henry Grant had taken a fall from the hayloft, possibly broken his hip. The foreman who'd sent word said he was asking for her. Evelyn couldn't wait, couldn't sit idle while her father lay hurting 30 miles away at the ranch. So she'd kissed his worried forehead, ignored his protests, and set out on her dappled mare Juniper with the confidence of a woman who'd been riding these mountain trails since she could walk. That confidence felt like a distant memory now. The first drops had been deceptive, fat and warm, almost playful as they spattered against the brim of her hat. Evelyn had urged Juniper into an easy lope, thinking they could outrun the worst of it. But Montana storms didn't negotiate. Within 15 minutes, the sky had opened with a violence that took her breath away. Rain came down in sheets so thick she could barely see Juniper's ears. Thunder rolled across the mountains like artillery fire, each boom closer than the last, until the air itself seemed to vibrate with menace. "Easy, girl, easy now," Evelyn murmured, trying to keep her voice steady even as her heart hammered against her ribs. She could feel Juniper's muscles bunching with fear beneath her, the mare's gait becoming choppy and unpredictable. "We're almost to the turnoff, just hold on." But she'd miscalculated. In the deluge, she'd missed the fork in the trail, the one that led around the ridge instead of along it. By the time she realized her mistake, they were on the narrow path that hugged the ravine's edge, where the ground fell away sharply into a 40-foot drop of rock and scrub pine. In good weather, it was manageable. In this storm, it was suicide. Lightning split the sky so close, Evelyn felt the hair on her arms stand up. The crack of thunder came simultaneously, no gap between flash and sound, and the air filled with the sharp ozone smell of electricity. Juniper screamed, an almost human sound of pure terror, and reared violently. Evelyn was a good rider. She'd won ribbons at county fairs, could ride bareback across her father's fields with her arms spread wide like wings. But good wasn't enough when 1,200 pounds of panicked horse decided the ground was lava and the sky was falling. She felt herself slipping, her rain-slick hands losing their grip on the reins. Time did that strange thing it does in moments of crisis, stretched and compressed simultaneously. She saw every detail with crystal clarity, the white ring around Juniper's rolling eye, the mud spraying from her hooves, the scraggly pine tree jutting from the ravine wall that would either catch her or kill her. Then she was falling. The impact drove the air from her lungs. She hit the slope hard, her right side taking the brunt of it, and then she was rolling, tumbling through mud and rock and thorny scrub. Something sharp caught her jacket, tearing it. Her hat flew off. The world became a nauseating blur of sky and ground, rain and pain, until finally she slammed into something solid enough to stop her momentum. For several seconds, Evelyn couldn't breathe, couldn't think, couldn't do anything but lie there in the mud with rain hammering her face. Her first coherent thought was that she was still alive. Her second was that she might not be for long if she didn't get up. She tried to move and gasped as pain lanced through her right ankle. When she looked down, she could see it was already swelling, pushing against the leather of her boot. Not broken, she'd broken her left wrist as a child and remembered that particular flavor of agony, but badly sprained. Above her, Juniper's terrified whinnying echoed off the rocks. At least her horse was still up there, still alive. "Juniper!" Evelyn called, or tried to. Her voice came out as a croak, immediately swallowed by the storm. She was perhaps 20 feet down the slope, caught against a boulder that might have saved her life. Below, the ravine continued its steep descent into a tangle of rocks and dead trees that would have killed her for certain. She had to get up, had to climb. But when she tried to put weight on her right foot, the pain was so intense it grayed out her vision at the edges. She fell back against the boulder, breathing hard, rain streaming into her eyes. This was bad. This was very, very bad. The temperature was dropping. She could feel it even through the rain. Her clothes were soaked through, and she was already starting to shiver. Night would fall in a few hours, and if she was still out here, injured and wet, hypothermia would finish what the fall had started. Nobody knew exactly where she was. Her father thought she was taking the main road. Even when she didn't arrive, it would take time for anyone to organize a search in this weather. Panic fluttered in her chest like a trapped bird. Evelyn forced it down. She was a Grant. Her people had crossed the Oregon Trail, survived the winter of 1886 that had killed 90% of the cattle in Montana Territory. She would not die on a muddy slope within sight of her father's land. She started to crawl. It was undignified and agonizing. Every movement sent fresh bolts of pain shooting up her leg. Mud caked her clothes, her hair, her face. She used rocks and roots to pull herself upward, inch by tortuous inch. Above, Juniper was still calling out, but the sound seemed to be moving away. The horse was probably heading home, following instinct back to the barn. Evelyn didn't blame her. She'd made perhaps 10 feet when she heard it, a sound that didn't belong to the storm, the rhythmic splash of hooves moving through water. At first she thought she'd imagined it, that her desperate mind was conjuring rescue. But then she heard a man's voice, low and calm, speaking words she couldn't quite make out. "Help!" Evelyn tried to shout, but her voice was barely audible even to herself. "Help! I'm down here!" The hoofbeats stopped. Silence, except for the rain and thunder. Then, "Hello? Someone out there?" The voice was closer now, masculine and measured, with that particular Montana accent that turned vowels round and soft. Evelyn dragged herself up another few inches, gasping with the effort. "Here! I'm here! Down the slope!" She heard the sound of boots hitting mud, and then a figure appeared at the edge of the ravine, backlit by the storm-dark sky. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a long oilskin duster that shed water like duck feathers. She couldn't make out his face beneath the brim of his hat, but something in the way he moved spoke of absolute capability, of a man who'd seen worse things than a storm and come through unshaken. "Jesus Christ," he breathed, taking in the scene. Then louder, "Don't move, miss. I'm coming down." "My ankle," Evelyn managed. "I can't." "I see it. Just stay still." He moved down the slope with a sureness that seemed impossible in these conditions, picking his path as if he'd done this 100 times before. When he reached her, he dropped to one knee, and she finally got a clear look at his face. He was perhaps 35, maybe a year or two older, with the kind of weathered handsomeness that came from years of outdoor work. Strong jaw, straight nose, lips pressed into a line of concentration. But it was his eyes that caught her, pale blue, almost gray, steady and calm despite the chaos around them. They swept over her in quick assessment, professional as a doctor's, noting her injuries with a practiced eye. "I'm Cole Maddox," he said. "Can you tell me your name?" "Evelyn Grant. Henry Grant's daughter." Something shifted in his expression. Recognition, maybe respect. Everyone in Park County knew her father. "Miss Grant, I'm going to check your ankle. This might hurt." His hands were gentle but thorough, probing the swollen joint through her boot with the kind of expertise that spoke of experience with injuries. Evelyn bit her lip to keep from crying out. "Not broken," he said after a moment. "Bad sprain, though. You can't walk on this. I'm going to have to carry you up." "My horse." Saw a dappled mare on the trail, heading east at a good clip. "She'll make it home. Right now I need to get you out of this weather." He shrugged out of his duster and wrapped it around her shoulders. It was warm from his body heat and smelled of horse and leather and wood smoke. "Put your arms around my neck." "I can try to—" "Miss Grant." He fixed her with those steady eyes. "I don't mean to be forward, but you're hurt, cold, and heading toward shock if we don't move fast. Pride's got no place in a Montana storm. Now put your arms around my neck." There was something in his voice, not unkind, but absolutely certain, that made arguing seem pointless. Evelyn wrapped her arms around his shoulders, and he lifted her as if she weighed nothing at all. One arm went under her knees, the other around her back, and then he was standing, holding her against his chest. Hold on tight. This part's tricky. He wasn't exaggerating. The climb back up the slope was treacherous, made more so by the added weight he was carrying. But Cole Maddox moved with the same measured confidence, finding purchase where Evelyn would have sworn none existed, balancing them both with unconscious skill. Lightning flashed again, closer, and thunder rolled across the valley like God clearing his throat. Evelyn found herself pressing her face against his shoulder, breathing in that smell of safety, trying not to think about what would happen if he slipped. He didn't slip. At the top of the ravine, a black stallion waited with the patience of a well-trained animal, barely flinching at the thunder. Cole settled Evelyn into the saddle first, then swung up behind her, one arm coming around her waist to hold her secure against his chest. My ranch is about 3 miles west, he said, his breath warm against her ear. Henry's place is closer, but I don't know the way from here in this weather, and you need to get inside and warm. That acceptable to you? Evelyn nodded, not trusting her voice. The adrenaline that had kept her moving was draining away, leaving her shaky and suddenly aware of just how cold she was. Her teeth started to chatter. Cole made a soft clicking sound, and the stallion started forward at an easy walk, steady despite the storm. The man's arm tightened around her waist. Not inappropriate, just secure, holding her in place so she didn't have to work to stay upright. You'll ride again, he said suddenly, and there was something in his voice that made it more than just words. I promise you that, Miss Grant. You'll ride again. She wanted to believe him. More than that, she wanted to understand why it felt so important that he'd said it, why those 4 words, you'll ride again, hit her somewhere deeper than her injury, somewhere in the core of her that had always defined itself by movement and independence and the feel of a horse beneath her. How do you know? She whispered. Because quitters don't crawl 20 feet up a muddy slope in a lightning storm. And you, Miss Grant, don't strike me as a quitter. They rode in silence after that, Cole guiding them through the storm with steady hands. Evelyn drifted in and out of awareness, lulled by the stallion's rhythm and the warmth of the man at her back. She caught glimpses through the rain, a fence line, a stand of cottonwoods, the dark shape of buildings emerging from the gray curtain of water. Then they were riding into a yard, and a door flew open, spilling golden lamplight into the storm. Cole Maddox, is that you? A woman's voice, sharp with worry. Lord have mercy, what have you got there? Injured rider, Cole called back. Get the guest room ready, Martha, and put water on to boil. He dismounted in one smooth motion, then lifted Evelyn down with the same easy strength. Her world tilted, and she grabbed his shoulders to steady herself. I've got you, he said quietly. I've got you. And somehow, impossibly, she believed him. The woman, Martha, apparently, held the door while Cole carried Evelyn inside. The warmth hit her like a physical thing, making her gasp. The room was simple but clean, wooden floors worn smooth by years of use, a stone fireplace where a fire crackled cheerfully, furniture that looked handmade but sturdy. It smelled like coffee and bread and beeswax polish, homey in a way that made her throat tight. Second door on the left, Martha directed, already bustling ahead with the efficiency of someone who knew how to handle a crisis. She was perhaps 60, gray-haired and solid, with the kind of face that had smiled often over the years. Poor lamb, she's shaking like a leaf. How bad is she hurt? Ankles sprained, some bruising. She took a fall down the ravine near Miller's Pass. Martha made a tisking sound. That's a bad stretch, even in good weather. You're blessed to be alive, child. Here now, let's get you out of those wet clothes. Cole laid Evelyn on a bed that felt like heaven after the mud and rain. For a moment his hand lingered on her shoulder, and she looked up to find him watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Thank you, she said. You saved my life. Just happened to be in the right place. But something in his eyes suggested it meant more than that. Martha will take good care of you. I need to see to the horses and send word to your father so he doesn't worry. He's injured at the ranch. That's why I was riding. I'll make sure the message gets through. You rest now. He was gone before she could say anything else, his boots echoing on the wooden floor. Martha immediately set about unbuttoning Evelyn's ruined jacket, clucking her tongue at the mud and tears. "That man," she said, with the kind of affection that spoke of long acquaintance. "Can't pass a soul in trouble without stopping. Found a half-frozen prospector last winter, brought him home and nursed him for 3 weeks. That's just Cole's way." Evelyn wanted to ask more. Who was this Cole Maddox? Why did he live out here? Was there a Mrs. Maddox? But exhaustion was pulling at her like a tide. Martha helped her out of her wet clothes with brisk efficiency, producing a flannel nightgown that was warm and soft and smelled of lavender. Then came the difficult part, examining her ankle. "Oh, honey," Martha said softly when she eased off the boot. The ankle had swollen to nearly twice its normal size, already purpling with bruises. "This is going to hurt something fierce for a few days." But Cole was right. It's not broken. I've seen my share of breaks, and this isn't one. You were lucky. Lucky. Evelyn supposed she was, though it didn't feel that way as Martha wrapped the ankle in cool, wet cloths. She hissed at the pain, fingers gripping the quilt. I know, but we need to get the swelling down. I'll make you some willow bark tea. It'll help with the pain and let you sleep. Lord knows you need it." She bustled out, leaving Evelyn alone in the quiet room. Through the window, she could see the storm was finally starting to break, the rain gentling to a steady patter. Lightning still flickered in the distance, but the fury had passed, leaving behind the kind of clean, electric smell that came after violence. Evelyn closed her eyes and saw it again. The moment when Juniper reared, when the ground disappeared, when she'd known with absolute certainty that she was going to die. Then Cole's face emerging from the storm, those steady blue eyes, his voice cutting through her panic. "I've got you." Something had shifted in that moment. Some fundamental understanding of herself and her place in the world had been knocked loose by the fall, and she wasn't sure yet how to put it back together. She'd always been so confident, so certain of her ability to handle anything life threw at her. But now she knew how quickly it could all be taken away. The door opened and Martha returned with a steaming mug. "Drink this, dear. All of it, even though it's bitter. Cole's seen to your mare. Seems she made it to the Johnson place down the road. They'll stable her overnight and he'll fetch her tomorrow. Your father's been sent word that you're safe. He'll be relieved even if he's still fretting in his bed. You know my father? Everyone knows Henry Grant, child. Good man, fair to his workers, honest in his dealings. Gave Cole advice when he was starting out, didn't charge him anything for it either. Cole remembered that." She settled into a chair by the bed, her hands busy with some mending. "He's good about remembering kindnesses. Not so good at forgetting hurts, but then, who is?" Evelyn sipped the tea. It was indeed bitter, but not unbearably so. "How long have you worked for Mr. Maddox?" 7 years come spring. He hired me after—" She paused, and something passed across her face, some shadow of old sorrow. "Well, after he needed someone to help keep this place from falling into chaos. Man alone can only do so much." "He's not married, then?" Martha's hand stilled on her mending. When she looked up, her eyes were kind, but sad. "That's his story to tell, not mine. But no, honey, he's not married. Not anymore. Not anymore." The words hung in the air, heavy with implication. Evelyn wanted to press, but the tea was already working, sending warm tendrils of drowsiness through her limbs. Her eyelids grew heavy. "That's it," Martha said softly. "You sleep now. Tomorrow things will look better. They always do after a storm passes." Evelyn wasn't sure she believed that, but she was too tired to argue. She let herself drift, the sound of rain on the roof and Martha's gentle humming weaving together into a lullaby. Her last conscious thought was of Cole Maddox carrying her through the storm, his voice in her ear making promises he had no reason to keep. "You'll ride again." She wanted to believe him. God, how she wanted to believe him. When Evelyn woke, the room was full of thin morning light, and the storm was gone. For a moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then she tried to move, and pain shot through her ankle, bringing memory flooding back. The fall, the fear, the man on the black stallion who'd pulled her from the ravine. She sat up carefully, testing her body's limits. Everything hurt. Her right side was a mass of bruises. Her hands were scraped raw, and her ankle throbbed with every heartbeat. But she was alive, warm, and safe. It could have been so much worse. The door opened after a soft knock, and Martha appeared with a breakfast tray. "Ah, you're awake, good. I was starting to worry. You slept 12 hours straight. How's the ankle?" "It hurts." "I expect it does. But that's your body healing. I've brought you eggs, toast, and coffee. Real coffee. Not that chicory nonsense some folks try to pass off. Eat up. You need your strength." The food was simple but delicious, and Evelyn realized she was ravenous. She'd missed dinner entirely yesterday. While she ate, Martha opened the curtains, revealing a view of rolling pastureland dotted with cattle. The morning was crystal clear, the way it often was after storms, with the mountains sharp-edged against an impossibly blue sky. "Where's Mr. Maddox?" Evelyn asked. "Out with the hands, checking for storm damage. Some fences came down, and there's a section of the barn roof that needs patching. He'll be in for lunch." Martha paused. "He sat with you for a spell last night, after you fell asleep, just making sure you were all right. He worries, even when he pretends not to." Something warm unfurled in Evelyn's chest at the image. Cole Maddox sitting vigil in the darkness, watching over a stranger because that was simply who he was. The kind of man who kept promises, even ones made in the heat of crisis. "I should send word to my father," Evelyn said. "He'll want to know I'm all right." "Already done. Cole rode out at first light, spoke to your father's foreman himself. Henry knows you're here and mending. The foreman says your daddy's hip is bruised but not broken. He was trying to get up before he should and took another tumble, the stubborn fool." Evelyn smiled despite herself. That sounded exactly like her father. "Then I should get home to him." "Not on that ankle, you won't. Doctor's orders, well, Cole's orders, but he knows what he's talking about. You need to stay off it for at least a few days. Let the swelling go down proper before you even think about putting weight on it. Your father understands. He said, and I quote, 'Tell my girl to mind Cole and not give him any of her sass.'" Martha's eyes twinkled. "So you just rest easy, honey. You're exactly where you need to be." Evelyn wasn't sure how she felt about that. She'd never been good at being still, at depending on others, but her ankle made the decision for her. When she tried to stand, even with Martha's help, the pain was immediate and intense enough to gray out her vision. "All right," she gasped, sinking back onto the bed. "All right, I'll stay. For a day or two?" Sensible girl. Now Cole brought in some books from his library, thought you might want something to read. He's got quite the collection, surprising maybe for a rancher, but that man's got depths. She left the books on the bedside table, a volume of Whitman's poetry, a novel by Jack London, and a worn copy of Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Evelyn picked up the last one, intrigued. The pages were dog-eared, marked with notes in the margins written in a firm, decisive hand. This was a book that had been read many times, not just displayed on a shelf for show. She opened to a marked passage. "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." Someone had underlined it twice and written in the margin, "Remember this, especially when it's hard." Evelyn found herself wondering what had been hard for Cole Maddox. What storms had he weathered that required stoic philosophy to survive? Martha's words echoed in her mind. Not married, not anymore. She was still pondering this when boots sounded in the hall, and then Cole himself appeared in the doorway. He'd clearly been working, his shirt was rolled to his elbows, his hands showed evidence of fence repair, and there was a smudge of something dark across his jaw. But those blue-gray eyes were just as steady as she remembered. "Miss Grant, good to see you awake. How are you feeling?" "Sore, stupid, grateful." She gestured at the room, the books, the tray. "Thank you for all of this. For everything." He shrugged, uncomfortable with the gratitude. Anyone would have done the same. "I don't think that's true, but I appreciate your modesty." She held up the Marcus Aurelius. "And thank you for the books. This one especially." Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or pleasure. "You know the Meditations? My father's a great believer in classical education, even for daughters. I've read it, though not as thoroughly as you apparently have." He moved into the room, and she noticed he kept a respectful distance, staying near the door. Proper, considering they were essentially strangers, even if he had carried her through a storm and seen her at her most vulnerable. "It helps," he said simply. When things get complicated. Marcus reminds me that I can't control the weather or the market, or whether disease strikes the herd. I can only control how I respond. Is that easy for you, letting go of control? His laugh was short and held no humor. No, Miss Grant. It's the hardest damn thing in the world, but necessary. The alternative is madness. There was weight behind those words, something heavy and old. Evelyn wanted to ask, to understand, but she sensed it was too soon, that trust was something that had to be earned slowly with this man. Well, she said instead, I'm working on my own lesson in letting go, starting with accepting that I can't walk for a few days. That's wisdom right there. Most folks would be up and hurting themselves worse out of sheer stubbornness. He paused. Your father wanted me to tell you he's proud of you, said you showed good sense in accepting help, which apparently isn't always your strong suit. Evelyn felt her cheeks warm. He knows me too well. Fathers usually do. Cole shifted, and she realized he was about to leave. I'll let you rest. Martha's making chicken and dumplings for dinner, her specialty. You need anything, you just call out. Someone's always nearby. Mr. Maddox? She stopped him at the door. That promise you made, about riding again. Did you mean it? He turned back, and the look he gave her was so intense it made her breath catch. I never say things I don't mean, Miss Grant. You'll ride again. When you're healed and ready, I'll personally make sure of it. That's a promise I intend to keep. Then he was gone, leaving Evelyn alone with her thoughts and the sound of her own racing heart. Over the next 2 days, a routine established itself. Martha brought meals and changed the wrappings on Evelyn's ankle, which was slowly improving. Cole appeared periodically, never for long, always respectful of propriety, but present enough that Evelyn found herself listening for his boots in the hall. They talked about books, mostly. He had read widely, not just the classics, but contemporary works, science, philosophy, even poetry. He admitted with some embarrassment that he enjoyed Tennyson. It's not considered very masculine, he said, standing by the window of her room on the second afternoon, his silhouette dark against the bright sky. Liking poetry. The hands would never let me hear the end of it. Then the hands are fools. Tennyson understood loss and duty and the burden of leadership. That seems pretty masculine to me. He glanced at her, something warm in his expression. You're not what I expected, Miss Grant. What did you expect? Someone softer, maybe, more delicate. Henry Grant's daughter, I thought you'd be more like the society ladies who come through town, all concerned with dresses and gossip. Evelyn laughed. I own 3 dresses, and 2 of them are for church and funerals. I'd rather spend time with horses than people, and the last society event I attended, I ended up in an argument about land management with a banker from Helena who thought women shouldn't have opinions on such things. Let me guess. You won the argument. I made him look foolish enough that he left early. Does that count as winning? Cole's smile was genuine this time, reaching his eyes. In my book, yes. That evening, Martha had to attend to a sick friend in town, leaving with apologies and a covered dish on the table. You'll be all right? She asked Cole. I should be back by morning. We'll manage, Martha. Go on, and tell Judith I hope she feels better. Which meant Evelyn and Cole ate dinner alone, him carrying a tray to her room and settling into the chair Martha usually occupied. It should have been awkward, this strange intimacy, but somehow it wasn't. They talked about ranching, about the challenges of the upcoming season, about her father's operation, and how it compared to Cole's smaller spread. Henry's got twice the land and 3 times the cattle, Cole said, but he earned it through smart management and hard work. I respect that. He'd say the same about you. Building a place from nothing, that takes courage. Cole's expression shuddered slightly. Or desperation. Sometimes they look the same. Before she could ask what he meant, he changed the subject, asking about her childhood, her mother who'd died when she was 12, the responsibilities that had fallen to her as the only child. Evelyn found herself telling him things she rarely shared, her fear that she'd never be enough to help her father run the ranch, her frustration with the limitations placed on women in this territory, her secret dream of breeding horses that could win at the state fair. That's not a secret dream, Cole said. That's a business plan. Why haven't you done it? My father thinks it's impractical, says I should focus on finding a husband, settling down. And you don't want that? Evelyn considered the question carefully. I want it if it's right. But I won't marry just to satisfy convention. I'd rather be alone than be with someone who doesn't see me as a partner. Cole was quiet for a long moment, his eyes distant. That's wise. Marriage without partnership is a prison for both people. You speak as if from experience. She hadn't meant to say it, but the words were out before she could stop them. Cole stood abruptly, moving to the window, his back to her. I should let you rest. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry. You didn't, it's just... He sighed, and when he spoke again, his voice was carefully neutral. It's not a secret. Everyone in the county knows, so you'll hear it eventually anyway. I was married 7 years ago. My wife and our daughter died in childbirth. Both of them, same day. Evelyn's breath caught. Oh, Cole, I'm so sorry. Sarah was 23. The baby, we'd planned to name her Rose. She didn't even take a breath. The doctor said there were complications, that nothing could have been done. I've tried to believe that. He turned back to face her, and the pain in his eyes was raw. Some days I manage it. I manage. Is that why you read Marcus Aurelius, to help manage it? Among other things, control what you can, accept what you can't. It's a good philosophy when the alternative is drowning in what-ifs and if-onlys. He managed a small smile. I'm getting better at it. 7 years is a long time, but I won't lie and say it's easy. Evelyn's throat was tight. She understood now the depths Martha had mentioned, the shadows in his eyes, the way he threw himself into helping others as if service could somehow balance the scales of loss. Thank you for telling me, she said quietly. And for the record, I think your wife would be proud of the man you've become, proud of how you've chosen to live, even when it hurts. Cole's eyes met hers, and something passed between them. Understanding, recognition, the beginning of trust. Get some rest, Miss Grant. Tomorrow, if you're feeling up to it, I thought you might like to sit outside for a while. Fresh air does wonders for healing. I'd like that. And Cole? She stopped him at the door. Thank you for trusting me with your story. He nodded once, then left her alone with the weight of new knowledge and the strange, growing certainty that she'd stumbled into something important on that storm-ravaged trail. Something that had nothing to do with falls or injuries or promises about riding again. Something that felt dangerously like fate. The next morning arrived with the kind of crystalline clarity that made Montana famous. Evelyn woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee drifting up from downstairs. Her ankles still ached, but the sharp, breathless pain had dulled to something more manageable. When she flexed her foot experimentally, she could almost imagine putting weight on it in another day or two. Martha bustled in with breakfast and a smile that suggested she knew something Evelyn didn't. Well, now you've got color back in your cheeks. That's good to see. Cole's got a surprise for you after you eat. A surprise? He'll be up shortly. Now eat your eggs before they get cold. True to her word, Cole appeared 20 minutes later, and Evelyn's heart did an unbidden little skip at the sight of him. He'd cleaned up from his morning chores, his hair still damp from washing, wearing a clean shirt the color of summer sky that made his eyes look even more striking. He carried something folded over his arm. Morning, Miss Grant. How's the ankle? Better. I might even be able to walk on it by tomorrow. Let's not rush things. But I thought you might be going stir-crazy in this room, so I wondered if you'd like to sit outside for a spell. Fresh air, sunshine, maybe some real coffee instead of Martha's attempt at keeping you caffeinated. He ignored Martha's mock-offended noise. I brought you this. He unfolded what he'd been carrying, a simple dress in dark green cotton, practical but pretty, with pearl buttons down the front. It was Sarah's, he said quietly. She was about your size. I thought, well, you can't stay in a nightgown forever, and your clothes from the storm are beyond saving. Martha washed this last night. Evelyn felt emotion tighten her throat. The gesture was so thoughtful, and yet she understood the weight of it, offering his dead wife's clothing to another woman. Are you sure? I don't want to... I'm sure. Sarah would have liked you. She had strong opinions too, and she wasn't afraid to share them. His smile was tinged with memory, but not painful. She also hated seeing things go to waste. So please, wear it. Do her memory honor by actually using something instead of letting it gather dust in a trunk. Martha helped her dress after Cole left, and Evelyn had to admit the gown fit remarkably well. When she caught sight of herself in the small mirror above the washstand, she barely recognized the woman looking back. Less polished than usual without her riding clothes and boots, but somehow softer, more vulnerable. The green brought out the gold flecks in her brown eyes. Cole's reaction when he returned confirmed what the mirror suggested. He stopped in the doorway, and something flickered across his face too quickly to name before his expression smoothed into careful neutrality. "It suits you," he said simply. "Ready?" He carried her down the stairs as easily as he had through the storm, and Evelyn tried not to notice how natural it felt to have her arms around his neck, how the solid warmth of him made her feel safe in ways that had nothing to do with physical danger. He settled her in a chair on the wide front porch, propping her injured foot on a cushioned stool, then disappeared inside only to return moments later with a quilt, a pot of coffee, and 2 cups. "Martha's orders," he explained, tucking the quilt around her legs despite the mild temperature. "She's convinced you'll catch a chill." "Martha worries too much. Martha's kept me from doing a dozen stupid things over the years. I've learned to listen." He poured coffee for them both and settled into the chair beside hers, stretching his long legs out with a sigh that spoke of a man unused to sitting still. The view from the porch was spectacular. Rolling pasture land swept down to a creek lined with cottonwoods, their leaves just beginning to hint at autumn gold. Beyond that, the mountains rose like sentinels, their peaks still holding last winter's snow. Cattle grazed in the distance, and closer in, Evelyn could see a half-dozen horses in a corral, including the black stallion that had carried them through the storm. "That's Midnight," Cole said, following her gaze. "Raised him from a colt. He's got a better temperament than most people I know. He was steady in the storm. That takes training and trust." "Mostly trust. I don't believe in breaking a horse's spirit to make it obedient. Partnership works better than domination, whether it's horses or people." He sipped his coffee. "Your mare's in the barn, by the way. Johnson brought her over this morning. She's got a few scratches, but nothing serious. Been eating like she's making up for the terror of the storm." "Can I see her?" "Tomorrow, if your ankle allows. Today, you sit and heal." They fell into comfortable silence, the kind that didn't need filling with chatter. Evelyn found herself studying Cole when she thought he wasn't paying attention. The way his hands curved around his coffee cup, the slight furrow between his brows that suggested he was always thinking several steps ahead, the set of his shoulders that spoke of burdens carried without complaint. "You're staring," he said without looking at her, amusement coloring his voice. "I'm observing. There's a difference." "Semantics." But he was smiling. "What are you observing?" "That you're uncomfortable sitting still, that you'd rather be working, that you're only here because you think you need to entertain me." Now he did look at her, eyebrows raised. "Am I that transparent?" "No, I just pay attention." Evelyn set down her coffee cup. "Cole, I appreciate everything you've done for me, more than I can say. But you don't have to babysit me. I'm perfectly content to sit here and enjoy the view. You have a ranch to run." He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze drifting to the mountains. "You're right that I'm not used to sitting still. Work's always been my way of managing things. But you're wrong that I'm here out of obligation." He turned to face her fully. "The truth is, I'm here because I want to be. Because talking with you is the most interesting thing that's happened to me in 7 years, and I'm not quite ready to give that up yet." The honesty of it stole her breath. Evelyn had known men who flattered and men who flirted, but Cole Maddox simply told the truth without artifice or agenda. It was refreshing and terrifying in equal measure. "Then stay," she heard herself say. "Tell me about your ranch, about how you built all this." So he did. The story came slowly at first, then with gathering momentum as he relaxed into the telling. He'd come to Montana 8 years ago with nothing but a small inheritance from his grandfather and a dream of building something lasting. The first year had nearly broken him: harsh winter, cattle disease, the isolation of the high country. Then he'd met Sarah at a church social in town, and everything had changed. "She made me believe I could do it," he said, his voice distant with memory. "Even when the bank was threatening foreclosure and I was ready to give up, she'd sit with me at the kitchen table and we'd figure it out together. Numbers, planning, which cattle to sell, and which to keep. She had a head for business that would have put most men to shame. She sounds remarkable. She was. Stubborn as hell, too. When she set her mind on something, there was no deterring her. His smile was bittersweet. We had 2 good years. Built this house, expanded the herd, started making a real go of it. Then she got pregnant, and we thought everything was finally coming together. He stopped, his jaw working. Evelyn waited, giving him space to find his words. The labor went on for 2 days. Doctor couldn't get the baby to turn. By the time they realized how bad it was too late. Sarah hemorrhaged. They took the baby, but she was already gone. Then Sarah just slipped away, like she was tired and decided to rest. I held her hand and watched her die, and there wasn't a goddamn thing I could do to stop it. His voice had gone flat, emotionless, but Evelyn could see the white-knuckled grip on his coffee cup, the muscle jumping in his jaw. She reached out and covered his hand with hers, offering wordless comfort. "I'm sorry you had to go through that," she said softly. "And I'm sorry there aren't better words to say it with." Cole looked down at their hands, his larger one calloused and scarred from work, hers smaller but no less marked by a life lived outdoors. "Thank you for not offering platitudes about God's plan or them being in a better place. People mean well, but sometimes those words just make it worse." "My mother died of fever when I was 12, Evelyn said. "I remember the parade of well-meaning neighbors saying similar things, that she was with the angels, that it was her time, that God needed another flower in his garden. All I could think was that I needed my mother more than God needed another flower." She squeezed his hand. "Grief doesn't follow a schedule or conform to pretty sayings. It just is." "How did you get through it?" "My father. He was drowning in his own grief, but he still showed up for me every day. Made sure I ate, kept going to school, taught me everything he knew about running the ranch, so I'd feel useful instead of helpless. He gave me purpose when I thought I'd lost mine." She paused. "I think that's what you've done here. Built purpose into every fence post and water trough. It's not running away if you're running towards something." Cole's eyes met hers, and the connection between them felt almost physical, a current of understanding that needed no words. "You see more than most people, Evelyn Grant." The use of her first name sent warmth spreading through her chest. "Only when I pay attention. And you're worth paying attention to, Cole Maddox." A rider appeared on the road, saving them both from the intensity of the moment. Cole stood, shading his eyes against the sun. "That's Tommy Barrett, one of the hands. Something must be up." The young cowboy rode into the yard at a gallop, his horse lathered. "Boss, we've got trouble. That new section of fence along the north pasture, something's knocked it down. Half the herd's wandered through, scattered to hell, and gone across Miller's property." Cole's expression shifted instantly from contemplative to decisive. "Round up who's available. I'll be right there." He turned to Evelyn. "I'm sorry. I have to go. I understand. I'll be fine." He hesitated, clearly torn between duty and hospitality. "Martha's in the kitchen. She'll help you inside when you're ready." "Cole," Evelyn caught his hand. "Thank you for telling me about Sarah, about your daughter. It means something that you trusted me with that." He squeezed her fingers briefly, then was gone, moving with the fluid purpose of a man in his element. Within minutes she heard horses and shouted orders, and then the hands were thundering out of the yard in a cloud of dust, Cole at their head on midnight. Martha appeared on the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. "Well, that's ranching for you. Never a dull moment. Come on, honey, let's get you back inside before you tire yourself out." "Actually, could I stay here a little longer? I promise I'll call if I need anything." Martha studied her with knowing eyes. "You're thinking about him, aren't you? About what he told you?" "He loved her very much." "He did. Loved her enough that when she died, a part of him died too. I worried for him those first few years. He worked himself half to death, barely ate, barely slept, just kept pushing, like if he stopped moving, he'd fall apart." She settled into the chair Cole had vacated. "But he's healing. Slowly, but he's healing. And I think you might be good for that process." "Martha, I've only been here 3 days." "Sometimes 3 days is enough. Sometimes you just know." The older woman's smile was gentle. I knew with my herald after one conversation at a barn dance. 42 years we had together before his heart gave out. Not long enough, but I'm grateful for every single day. Life's too short to waste time second-guessing what your heart already knows. My heart doesn't know anything yet. We barely know each other. Don't we, though? Seems to me you've both shared pieces of yourselves that most people keep locked away. That's knowing someone, honey. The important parts, anyway. She stood with a soft grunt. I'm not saying you need to decide anything today. Just don't let fear make your decisions for you. Now, I've got bread to bake. You holler if you need me. Evelyn sat alone on the porch, Martha's words echoing in her mind. Was it possible to feel this much for someone after only 3 days? The practical part of her said no, that this was just gratitude and proximity and the vulnerability of being injured. But another part, a deeper, more honest part, whispered that what she felt went beyond circumstances. Cole Maddox had saved her life, yes, but more than that, he'd treated her as an equal. He'd shared his books, his story, his grief. He'd offered her his wife's dress, not as a replacement, but as an honor. He'd looked at her and seen not Henry Grant's daughter or a potential wife or any of the other labels people usually applied, but simply Evelyn, a woman worth knowing. When had anyone last made her feel that way? The afternoon wore on, warm and peaceful. Evelyn dozed in her chair, lulled by the breeze and the distant lowing of cattle. She woke to the sound of returning riders and the slant of late-day sun. Cole dismounted in the yard, his shirt dusty and his face tired, but there was satisfaction in his expression. "We get them all," Martha called from the doorway. "Every last one. Fences fixed too, reinforced in case whatever hit it tries again. Probably a bear, judging by the tracks." He climbed the porch steps, and Evelyn noticed he favored his left side slightly. "How'd you fare? Not too bored, I hope." "I've been watching the mountains. It's better than any show in Helena." She gestured to his side. "Are you hurt?" "Just a bruise. Got between a stubborn steer and a fence post. I'll live." He started to sit, then seemed to think better of it. "I should clean up. I'm not fit company smelling like cattle and sweat." "Cole," Evelyn stopped him with a look. "I grew up on a ranch. You think I don't know what honest work smells like? Sit. Tell me about the fence." So he did, settling into his chair with visible relief and describing the afternoon's adventure with the kind of wry humor that suggested he'd done this 1,000 times before. The stubborn steer, the hand who'd nearly gotten trampled trying to show off, the section of fence that had fought them every inch of the way. "Tommy suggested we just shoot the steer and be done with it," Cole said, grinning. "He was only half joking." "But you didn't." "No, that steer's worth money, and I don't waste assets out of frustration. Besides, he was just scared. Can't blame an animal for that." He rolled his shoulders, trying to work out the stiffness. "Anyway, we got it handled. Tomorrow's problem will probably be something entirely different. That's ranching. That's life." He looked at her, really looked, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "You know, when I pulled you out of that ravine, I thought I was just helping someone in trouble. I didn't expect—" "What?" "This. You. Sitting on my porch talking about fences and stubborn steers like it's the most natural thing in the world." He shook his head. "I haven't felt this comfortable with anyone since Sarah. That probably sounds strange given the circumstances." "It doesn't sound strange at all." Evelyn's heart was beating faster now. "I feel it too. This ease. Like I've known you much longer than 3 days. 4 days, technically, but who's counting?" His smile was soft, almost shy. "Evelyn, Cole," Martha's voice interrupted from the doorway, sharp with urgency. "Rider coming. Fast." They both turned to see a horse and rider galloping up the road, the kind of speed that meant trouble. As they drew closer, Evelyn recognized the Johnsons' youngest son, Ben, his face flushed with exertion. "Mr. Maddox," he called out before he'd even properly stopped. "Your help's needed. Fire broke out in the south pasture about an hour ago, winds pushing it north toward the Miller place. They're calling all hands to help stop it before it jumps the creek." Cole was on his feet instantly, the moment between him and Evelyn forgotten in the face of crisis. "How bad?" "Bad, sir. Real bad. Started from a lightning strike last night, they think." Been smoldering in the underbrush and finally caught proper this afternoon. Sheriff's organizing bucket brigades. Right. Cole's mind was clearly already racing through logistics. Martha, get food together, whatever's portable. They'll need provisions. Ben, ride to the Jameson place, tell them what's happening. I'll gather my crew and meet you at Miller's Creek in 30 minutes. The boy nodded and wheeled his horse around, already galloping toward the next ranch. Cole turned to Evelyn, frustration and regret warring in his expression. I have to go. Fire's every rancher's nightmare. If it jumps that creek, then go. Don't apologize. Just go. Evelyn wished desperately that she could help, could ride out with him instead of being useless with her injured ankle. Be careful. He surprised her by taking her hand, holding it for just a moment. I will. And when this is over, we'll finish that conversation. Then he was moving, shouting orders, the ranch transforming from peaceful to purposeful in seconds. Martha helped Evelyn inside as men and horses poured out of the barn. Through the window, Evelyn watched Cole swing up onto midnight, his posture alert and commanding. He looked back at the house once, found her in the window, and lifted his hand in farewell. Then he was gone, leading his crew toward whatever hell waited in the south pasture. How bad can a fire get? Evelyn asked Martha, fear making her voice tight. The older woman's face was grim. Bad enough. We've been lucky this year. Good rain kept things green, but August dried things out some. If that fire gets into the grass with this wind... She didn't finish the thought. She didn't have to. Evelyn moved to help Martha pack provisions, bread, cheese, dried meat, canteens of water, even though her ankle protested every step. She couldn't ride out to fight the fire, but she could do this much. She could make sure Cole and his men had what they needed to survive the battle ahead. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose, Evelyn stood at the window and watched for signs of smoke. There, to the south, a dark smudge against the evening sky, growing darker and wider as she watched. The wind was picking up, rattling the window frames, pushing the fire toward populated areas. Toward Cole. Martha came to stand beside her, wiping her hands on her apron. Nothing to do now but wait and pray. I've seen fires before. Men either come home or they don't. All we can do is be ready for either outcome. That's cold comfort. It's the only comfort I've got, honey. This is Montana. Nature doesn't care about our plans or our feelings. She just is. She squeezed Evelyn's shoulder. But Cole's smart and careful. He'll come back. He has to. He made you a promise about riding again, and that man doesn't break his promises. Evelyn wanted to believe that, wanted to trust in Cole's competence and luck, and whatever else might keep him safe. But she'd learned on a rain-swept trail that the world didn't always play fair, that bad things happen to good people, that you could do everything right and still lose. She pressed her hand against the window glass as if she could somehow reach through distance and smoke to touch him, to keep him safe through sheer force of will. Come back, she whispered. Please come back. The night stretched long and anxious. Martha tried to get Evelyn to sleep, but rest was impossible. Instead, she sat in the parlor, Cole's copy of Marcus Aurelius open in her lap, though she couldn't focus enough to read. The words her father had once taught her ran through her mind like a prayer. Control what you can, accept what you can't. But acceptance felt like surrender, and Evelyn had never been good at surrender. Near midnight, Martha dozed off in her chair, exhaustion finally claiming her. Evelyn stayed awake, watching shadows dance on the walls, listening to the wind, imagining she could smell smoke, though the fire was miles away. She thought about Cole carrying her through the storm, his voice steady in chaos. She thought about him sitting on this porch, sharing his grief, trusting her with his broken places. She thought about the conversation they hadn't finished, the words that had hung unspoken between them. What had he been about to say before Ben arrived? What had that look in his eyes meant? The one that had made her heart stutter and her breath catch. And why did the thought of never finding out make her want to scream? Somewhere around 2 a.m, Martha jerked awake. Did you hear that? Evelyn had, the distant sound of hoofbeats, multiple horses moving at a weary walk. She pulled herself to her feet, ignoring her ankle's protest, and hobbled to the door. Martha got there first, flinging it open to reveal a group of riders emerging from the darkness. They were a sight, ash-covered, exhausted, some sporting burns or bandages. But they were alive, and in the center of the group, sitting tall on midnight despite obvious fatigue, was Cole Maddox. Relief hit Evelyn so hard her knees went weak. She grabbed the door frame for support, blinking back sudden tears. He was alive. He was home. Cole dismounted stiffly, saying something to his men that Evelyn couldn't hear. They dispersed toward the bunkhouse while he trudged toward the main house. When he spotted Evelyn in the doorway, his stride faltered, then quickened. "You shouldn't be on your feet," were his first words, spoken with more emotion than the statement warranted. "Neither should you, probably. You look like hell." "Feel like it too." He climbed the porch steps, and in the lamplight she could see the extent of it. His face streaked with ash and sweat, his shirt singed in places, his hands wrapped in makeshift bandages. But we stopped it. Fire's contained, Miller's place is safe, and so's everyone else's. Thank God. Then before she could think better of it, Evelyn stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him, ignoring how he smelled like smoke and char and hard work. "Thank God you're all right." For a moment, Cole stood frozen, as if he'd forgotten how to respond to an embrace. Then his arms came around her, careful despite his obvious exhaustion, and he rested his chin on top of her head. "I promised I'd come back," he said quietly. "I keep my promises." They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the doorway while Martha bustled around them, making concerned noises about burns and exhaustion. Finally, Cole pulled back, his hands lingering on Evelyn's shoulders. "I should clean up, get these burns tended, then sleep for about 3 days. Then let me help." Before he could protest, Evelyn added, "Martha can supervise if propriety demands it, but you're dead on your feet and those hands need proper wrapping. Let me do this, please." He was too tired to argue. Martha brought water and clean bandages to the kitchen, then tactfully retreated to prepare food. Evelyn guided Cole to a chair and knelt beside him, carefully, favoring her good ankle, to unwrap his injured hands. The burns weren't terrible, but they weren't minor either. Blisters covered his palms and fingers where he'd gripped hot tools or touched ember-heated surfaces. Evelyn cleaned them gently, applying the salve Martha provided, then wrapping them in clean linen with hands that were steadier than she felt. "You're good at this," Cole observed, watching her work. "My father's crew had accidents sometimes. I learned young how to patch people up." She finished one hand and started on the other. "Does it hurt?" "Not as much as it could. Mostly I'm just tired." His eyes were heavy-lidded, exhaustion pulling at him. "We fought that fire for 8 hours straight. Thought we'd lose the Miller barn at one point, but the wind shifted just in time." "Any serious injuries?" "Tommy got burned worse than me. He'll be laid up for a few days. And old Jensen breathed in too much smoke, but he'll recover. Could have been worse. Could have been so much worse." Evelyn tied off the last bandage, but she didn't release his hand immediately. Instead, she held it carefully, looking up at him with all the fear and relief and something deeper roiling in her chest. "When you rode out, I was terrified," she admitted. "I kept thinking about all the things we didn't get to say, all the conversations we didn't get to finish." Cole's thumb brushed across her knuckles, a gentle back and forth that sent shivers up her arm. "Like the one Ben interrupted?" "Yes. Evelyn." He said her name like a question and an answer all at once. "I don't know what this is between us. I don't know if it's gratitude or proximity or something more. But I know that when I was out there fighting that fire, you're who I thought about. You're who I wanted to come back to." Her heart was pounding so hard she was certain he could hear it. "That scares me." "Me too. I didn't think I'd feel this way again. Didn't think I could. Sarah was my everything, and when I lost her, I thought that part of my life was over." His eyes held hers, intense despite his exhaustion. "But then you fell out of that storm into my life. And suddenly, I'm feeling things I thought were dead, wanting things I thought I'd given up on." "What do you want?" Evelyn whispered. "More time, more conversations, more mornings watching you on my porch, and evenings talking about books and philosophy and anything else we can think of." He cupped her cheek with his bandaged hand, so gentle despite the pain it must have caused. "I want to keep my promise about you writing again. I want to see you heal and grow stronger. I want—" He stopped, laughed softly. "I want more than 3 days with you, Evelyn Grant." She leaned into his touch. her own hand covering his. Then take them. Take as many days as you need, as we both need. Martha chose that moment to return with a plate of food, and they sprang apart like guilty teenagers. But the housekeeper just smiled knowingly and set the plate in front of Cole. Eat, then sleep, and the world will still be here tomorrow, and so will your feelings. She fixed them both with a stern look that couldn't quite hide her approval. But for now, you both need rest. Evelyn, back to bed with you. Cole, eat, and then I want you horizontal for at least 6 hours. Doctor's orders. You're not a doctor, Cole pointed out. I've been keeping you alive for 7 years. That makes me qualified enough. She shooed Evelyn toward the stairs. Go on, both of you. Tomorrow's soon enough for whatever this is. Evelyn climbed the stairs slowly, her ankle protesting, but she looked back once to find Cole watching her with an expression that made her pulse race. He lifted his bandaged hand in a small wave, and she returned it, feeling like they'd crossed some invisible threshold that couldn't be uncrossed. In her room, she lay awake listening to the sounds of Cole moving around downstairs, the creak of floorboards as he finally headed to his own bed. The house settled into quiet, but Evelyn's mind raced with everything that had happened, everything that had been said. 4 days ago, she'd been thrown from her horse, terrified and alone. Now she was lying in a dead woman's nightgown, in a stranger's house, falling for a man she barely knew, but somehow understood better than people she'd known her entire life. It was madness. It was reckless. It was the last thing she'd expected when she'd set out to reach her father's ranch. But as she finally drifted toward sleep, one thought rose above all others. She didn't want to leave. Not yet. Maybe not ever. And that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. Morning came too soon and not soon enough. Evelyn woke to voices drifting up from downstairs, urgent, male, overlapping in a way that set her nerves on edge. She sat up carefully, testing her ankle. The swelling had gone down considerably, and when she stood, bearing weight sent only a dull ache through the joint rather than the sharp agony of previous days. Progress. She dressed quickly in Sarah's green dress, finger-combing her hair into something presentable, then made her way downstairs. The voices grew clearer as she descended, Cole's steady baritone, Tommy's higher-pitched anxiety, and a third voice she didn't recognize, rough with exhaustion and fear. They were gathered in the kitchen, 3 men clustered around the table where a pot of coffee sat forgotten. Cole stood with his back to her, his bandaged hands braced on the table's edge, still wearing yesterday's smoke-stained shirt. He hadn't slept, she realized. Or if he had, it hadn't been for long. Boss, I'm telling you, those embers must have been smoldering all night, Tommy was saying, his young face pale beneath its layer of soot. We thought we had it beat, but the wind picked up again around dawn and— The south pasture's gone, the third man interrupted. He was older, weathered, with the kind of face that had seen too many disasters to be shocked by one more. Fire jumped the firebreak we dug. It's eating through the grass faster than we can stop it. Another hour and it'll hit the tree line. After that, there's no containing it. Cole's shoulders were rigid with tension. How many men do we have fighting it now? 15, maybe 20. Johnson sent his crew over and some of the townfolk came out. But it's not enough. We need every able body, and even then— The man shook his head. I've been ranching 40 years, Cole. I've never seen a fire move this fast. Then we make it enough. Cole straightened, and even from behind, Evelyn could see the weight of command settling over him like a cloak. Tommy, ride to town. Tell Sheriff Morrison we need the volunteer brigade. Tell him to ring the church bell. That'll bring folks running. Hanson, get back to the line. I'll gather whoever's here and be right behind you. The older man, Hanson, nodded and headed for the door, nearly colliding with Evelyn in his haste. He muttered an apology and kept moving. Tommy followed, leaving Evelyn and Cole alone in the suddenly quiet kitchen. He turned and saw her, and something in his expression cracked. Just for a moment, just enough for her to see the fear beneath the decisive exterior. You shouldn't be up. Your ankle is better, much better. She moved into the room, studying his face. You didn't sleep. Couldn't. Kept thinking about those embers, about whether we'd really gotten them all. He laughed, bitter and tired. Turns out I was right to worry. Some good that does me now. Cole, you can't blame yourself for this. You did everything you could. Did I? His voice was sharp, honed by exhaustion and frustration. Because from where I'm standing, I'm about to lose a third of my grazing land, maybe more. If this fire reaches the timber, if it jumps to the neighboring properties. He stopped, dragging a hand through his hair. Christ, Evelyn, I can't lose this place. It's all I have left of the life I built with Sarah. It's the only thing that makes sense anymore. She crossed to him, ignoring the twinge in her ankle, and took his bandaged hands in hers. Then we don't let that happen. Tell me what I can do. There has to be something. There's nothing. You're injured and I won't have you risking yourself for what? For your home, for land that means everything to you? She squeezed his hands, making him meet her eyes. Cole Maddox, you pulled me out of a ravine in a lightning storm. You carried me to safety, tended my injuries, gave me shelter. Let me help you now. Even if it's just preparing food and water for the men, let me do something. He searched her face for a long moment, and she could see him weighing pride against practicality, his instinct to protect against the simple truth that he needed help. Finally, he nodded. Martha's already started cooking. Help her. The men will need food and water, lots of both. Bandages, too, for burns and cuts. We'll set up a station near the fire line where people can rest and resupply. He pulled his hands free, already moving toward the door. I have to go. If the wind shifts. I know, go. We'll handle things here. He paused at the door, looking back at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Yesterday I told you I wanted more time. More days. Don't make me regret saying that by getting yourself hurt trying to help. Same to you. Come back in one piece, Cole. We have conversations to finish. His smile was brief but genuine. Yes, ma'am. Then he was gone, his boots thundering across the porch, his voice rising in commands that sent the ranch into organized chaos. Evelyn found Martha in the kitchen, already elbow-deep in preparations. The older woman took one look at her and nodded approval. Good, I need hands. Can you slice bread? My arthritis is acting up something fierce this morning. They worked in efficient silence, falling into a rhythm born of shared purpose. Bread sliced thick, cheese wrapped in cloth, dried meat packed into sacks. Martha put 2 massive pots on the stove, filling them with water, potatoes, and whatever vegetables she could find. Soup, she explained, burns the least amount of fuel and feeds the most people. We'll need gallons of it before this is over. As they worked, Evelyn could see the smoke through the kitchen window, darker now, angrier, a black smudge against the bright morning sky that seemed to grow even as she watched. The wind was picking up, rattling the window panes, pushing the fire toward everything Cole had built. Around mid-morning, Ben Johnson appeared with a wagon. Mrs. Dyer, Mr. Maddox said to collect the provisions and bring them to the fire line. He set up a supply station near the creek. It's ready. Evelyn, help me load this. Together, they carried out pots of soup, sacks of food, crates of bandages, and medical supplies. Ben loaded it all with the quick efficiency of youth, then looked at Evelyn with obvious hesitation. Miss Grant, Mr. Maddox said you were to stay here. Said your ankle wasn't healed enough for... My ankle is fine. It wasn't entirely true, but it was true enough. And I'm coming with you. Someone needs to help distribute supplies and tend injuries. Martha can't do it alone, and I'm not sitting here useless while good people risk their lives. Ben looked like he wanted to argue, but knew better. Yes, ma'am. But if Mr. Maddox gets angry, I'll handle Cole Maddox. You just drive. The ride to the fire line took 20 minutes that felt like hours. As they drew closer, Evelyn could smell it, that acrid, choking scent of burning grass and wood that coated the back of her throat and made her eyes water. The smoke grew thicker, hanging in the air like fog, and through it she could see figures moving, shadows made substantial, fighting an enemy that consumed everything it touched. Ben pulled the wagon up near the creek, where someone had erected a rough shelter, canvas stretched between posts, open on all sides to allow airflow. Several men sat in its shade, coughing and drinking water, their faces black with soot. One had an ugly burn across his forearm that was already blistering. Evelyn climbed down from the wagon, forcing herself not to limp, and immediately set about organizing. The soup went on a makeshift table, tin cups beside it, bandages and medical supplies in easy reach, water buckets filled from the creek. She moved with purpose, remembering her father's words from years ago. In a crisis, useful hands beat worried hearts every time. Miss, you shouldn't be here. The man with the burned arm was watching her, concern cutting through his obvious pain. This ain't no place for a lady. Then it's lucky I'm not much of a lady. Evelyn gestured to his arm. Let me see that burn. When did it happen? Hour ago, maybe? Got too close to a burning branch. He held out his arm reluctantly, wincing as she examined it. The burn was second degree, angry and weeping, but clean. She could work with that. This is going to hurt, she warned, then began cleaning it with water and the carbolic solution Martha had packed. The man hissed through his teeth but didn't pull away. Evelyn worked quickly, applying salve and wrapping the burn in clean linen. Change this dressing every few hours. If you see red streaks or it starts to smell bad, get to a doctor immediately, understand? Yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Now eat something and rest. You're no good to anyone if you collapse from exhaustion. More men began trickling in as word spread about the supply station. Evelyn fell into a rhythm, serving soup, checking injuries, offering water and encouragement. Her ankle throbbed, but she ignored it. Pain was temporary. These men needed help, and she could provide it. She was wrapping a young boy's blistered hands when she heard a commotion near the fire line, shouting, urgent and panicked. Several men came running, supporting someone between them. As they drew closer, Evelyn's heart seized. It was Tommy. His face was gray beneath the soot, his right leg dragging, his shirt torn and bloodied. But it was the man supporting his other side that made Evelyn's world tilt and narrow to a single point of focus. Cole, moving with grim determination despite the way he cradled his left arm against his chest. Blood soaked through his sleeve, dripping from his fingers. What happened? Evelyn was already moving, clearing space, her training overriding her fear. Burning tree came down, one of the men explained, helping ease Tommy onto a blanket. Caught Tommy's leg. Cole pulled him clear but took a branch across his arm. It's bad, miss. Real bad. Cole was trying to wave away attention, his face tight with pain. I'm fine. Tommy's conscious and breathing. You're bleeding through your shirt. Evelyn pointed to the ground. Sit. Now. Something in her voice, the absolute authority of someone who wouldn't tolerate argument, made him comply. He sank down heavily, and Evelyn knelt beside him, reaching for his injured arm. He tried to pull away. Evelyn, Tommy's hurt worse. Help him first. There are 3 other men helping Tommy. There's no one helping you. She met his eyes, her own fierce. Now let me see your arm, or I swear I'll tie you down. Despite everything, a ghost of a smile touched his lips. You're terrifying when you're bossy. And you're infuriating when you're stubborn. Arm, now. He relented, extending his left arm. The sleeve was shredded, and beneath it, Evelyn could see a deep gash running from elbow to wrist, still bleeding sluggishly. It would need stitches, probably a dozen or more. But first she had to stop the bleeding. She worked quickly, cutting away the ruined sleeve, cleaning the wound as best she could with the supplies at hand. Cole watched her face rather than his injury, his jaw clenched against the pain. You shouldn't be here, he said quietly. I told Ben, Ben's not my keeper, neither are you. She pressed clean cloth against the wound, applying pressure. Hold this. Hard. He obeyed, his good hand covering hers for a moment. Evelyn, save your breath. You'll need it for what comes next. She glanced at one of the other men. I need whiskey if anyone has it, needle and thread from the medical kit, and someone to hold him down. Cole's eyes widened. You're going to stitch this? Here? Unless you want to ride to town and risk bleeding out on the way, yes. I've done it before. Stitched up one of my father's hands after he caught it on barbed wire. If I could handle his cursing, I can handle yours. I don't curse. You will. She retrieved the medical kit, finding the needle and thread Martha had thankfully included. Someone produced a flask of whiskey, and Evelyn poured it liberally over the needle, the thread, and finally the wound itself. Cole's breath hissed between his teeth, his good hand fisting in the fabric of his pants. Jesus! That's one. I'm counting. She threaded the needle with steady hands, grateful that fear hadn't made them shake. This is going to hurt worse than the whiskey. Do you want something to bite down on? Just do it. The first stitch made him go rigid, every muscle in his body tensing. The second brought a low sound from his throat that he tried to swallow. By the third, sweat beaded on his forehead despite the relatively cool air. Evelyn worked as quickly as she dared, her stitches small and neat, drawing the edges of the wound together with practiced precision. She'd learned this from the ranch doctor who visited quarterly, had practiced on leather and canvas until her fingers knew the rhythm. But this was different. This was Cole's flesh under her hands, Cole's blood on her fingers, Cole's pain she was causing even as she healed. "Talk to me," she said, needing to distract both of them. "Tell me about the fire. Is it contained?" "Getting there." His voice was strained but steady. "We've got the eastern flank stopped. Western side is the problem. Wind keeps shifting, pushing it toward the timber. If we can hold until sunset when the wind dies down—" He broke off with a sharp inhale as she pulled a particularly deep stitch tight. "Sorry, almost done. Don't apologize. You're saving my stubborn hide." He attempted a smile. "Again." "Someone has to. You're clearly terrible at self-preservation." She tied off the last stitch, cutting the thread with small scissors from the kit. "There. 16 stitches. That's going to scar. Add it to the collection." He flexed his arm experimentally and winced. "But it's solid work. Thank you. Thank me by not tearing them open, doing something heroic and stupid." She wrapped the arm in clean bandages, then helped him into a spare shirt someone provided. "Now you need to rest. At least an hour." "Can't. The fire will still be there in an hour. Cole, you've been fighting for almost 24 hours straight with minimal sleep and now a serious injury. You're no good to anyone if you collapse." She softened her tone. "Please, 1 hour. Then you can go back to being the fearless leader." He looked like he wanted to argue, but exhaustion and pain won out. 1 hour. But if the wind shifts, then someone will wake you, I promise." She pressed a cup of soup into his good hand. "Drink this. All of it." While Cole ate and reluctantly rested, Evelyn turned her attention to Tommy. The young cowboy's leg was badly bruised and swelling, but she didn't think it was broken. She wrapped it tightly, elevated it, and made him promise to stay off it for at least a day. "But the fire, miss, will be fought by people whose legs work properly. You've done your part. Don't make it worse by being stubborn." She'd learned that firm kindness worked best with young men who thought toughness meant ignoring injuries. The afternoon wore on in a blur of activity. More men came and went, some with minor injuries, others with exhaustion or smoke inhalation. Evelyn treated them all, her hand steady even when her heart raced with worry. The smoke grew thicker, and several times she heard distant crashes that meant trees were falling. The fire was spreading despite their best efforts. Cole woke after exactly 1 hour, his internal clock apparently immune to exhaustion. He tried to stand and swayed, grabbing the table for support. "You're not going back out there," Evelyn said firmly. "Like hell I'm not. That's my land burning. And you'll lose it faster if you pass out and hit your head on a rock." She moved to block his path. "Cole, be reasonable. You've lost blood, you're exhausted, and that arm needs time to start healing. Send someone else. Coordinate from here. But don't go back into that inferno." "I can't ask my men to do what I won't do myself." "You're not asking. You're leading by showing you trust them to do their jobs." She caught his good hand, holding tight. "Please, I just stitched you back together. Don't make me watch you fall apart again." Something in her voice, the barely controlled fear, the desperate edge, made him pause. He looked down at their joined hands, then back at her face. "You're scared," he said softly, as if just realizing. "Of course I'm scared. You nearly died pulling Tommy out. That tree could have crushed your skull instead of your arm. And you want to go back into the same situation that already hurt you once." Her voice cracked despite her best efforts. "I can't. Cole, I can't watch that. I can't sit here and wait to see if the next person they carry back is you, dead instead of injured." "Evelyn, no, listen to me." She was crying now, tears cutting tracks through the soot on her face, but she didn't care. 5 days ago, I didn't know you existed. Now the thought of losing you makes me feel like I can't breathe. That's terrifying and wonderful and completely insane, but it's true. So please, please don't go back out there. Not today. Not like this. Cole pulled her against his chest with his good arm, holding her as she shook. Around them, men tactfully looked away, giving them a semblance of privacy in the midst of chaos. All right, he murmured against her hair. All right, I'll stay. I'll coordinate from here. But Evelyn, you need to understand something. This ranch, this land, it's not just property to me. It's every dream I had with Sarah, every plan we made, every hope for the future. Losing it feels like losing her all over again. Evelyn pulled back enough to look at him, her hands framing his soot-stained face. Then don't lose it. Fight for it. But fight smart. Use your head instead of just your heart. That's what Sarah would want, isn't it? For you to survive? To build something lasting instead of throwing yourself into danger out of grief and guilt? The truth of her words hit him visibly. His eyes closed, and when they opened again, something had shifted in them. A kind of acceptance, or maybe just acknowledgement. You're right. God help me. You're right. He kissed her forehead, brief and chaste, but heavy with meaning. When did you get so wise? I had a good teacher, an old Roman emperor who believed in controlling what you can. She managed a watery smile. Now sit down and tell your men what needs doing. Be the leader they need, not the martyr. So Cole stayed, and Evelyn watched as he transformed the chaotic fire line into something organized and effective. He sent runners with messages, repositioned crews based on wind reports, coordinated bucket brigades and fire breaks with the strategic mind of a general directing troops, and slowly, painfully, they began to gain ground. The sun was setting when Hansen rode in with news. We've got it stopped on 3 sides. The 4th is burning itself out against the creek. There's nothing left for it to consume. By morning, it'll be dead ground. A ragged cheer went up from the exhausted men. Cole closed his eyes, relief washing over his features so profound it was almost painful to witness. How much did we lose? He asked quietly. Hansen's expression was grim. Most of the south pasture, maybe 60 acres total, could have been worse. If that wind had shifted even 5 degrees, we'd have lost everything. 60 acres. Evelyn watched Cole process this, saw him mentally calculating the loss in terms of feed, grazing land, revenue. It was substantial, maybe devastating, but not total. Could have been worse, Cole repeated, and it sounded like a prayer. Could have been so much worse. As night fell, the men began to disperse, some to their homes, others to the bunkhouse, all of them too exhausted for celebration. Evelyn helped pack up the supply station, moving with the careful precision of someone running on fumes. Her ankle was screaming now, swollen again from hours of standing, but she ignored it. There would be time for pain later. Cole appeared at her elbow, his face gray with exhaustion. Let's go home. Home. The word sent warmth through her chest. She let him help her into the wagon, not protesting when he climbed up beside her despite his own injuries. The ride back was quiet, both of them too tired for conversation, but his good arm stayed around her shoulders, keeping her steady as the wagon jolted over rough ground. At the ranch, Martha took one look at them and immediately went into action. Both of you, bathed and fed, and in bed within the hour, no arguments. Yes, ma'am, they chorused, too tired to do anything else. Evelyn bathed first, scrubbing away layers of soot and smoke until the water ran gray. Her ankle was indeed badly swollen again, and she felt a stab of guilt for pushing it so hard. But she'd do it again. Some things mattered more than personal comfort. When she emerged, wrapped in a clean nightgown, Cole was waiting in the hallway. He'd bathed too, his hair damp, his injured arm cradled against his chest. How's the arm? She asked. Hurts like hell. How's the ankle? About the same. They smiled at each other, exhausted and battered, and ridiculously pleased to both be alive. I owe you, Cole said quietly, for today. For staying. He gestured vaguely, encompassing everything, the stitches, the arguments, the tears, the stubborn insistence on helping despite her own injury. You don't owe me anything. Partners don't keep score. Partners. He tested the word and something warm entered his eyes. I like that. Is that what we are? I don't know what we are, but I know I'm not ready to leave. Not yet. She reached out, taking his good hand. My father's recovered enough by now. I could go home tomorrow, but I don't want to. Not until we figure out what this is between us. And if we can't figure it out, then at least we tried. That's better than spending the rest of our lives wondering what if. Cole lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles that felt like a promise. Stay then. As long as you want. As long as you need. This place is better with you in it. Martha cleared her throat from the kitchen doorway, her expression fond but firm. That's real sweet, you two, but you're both swaying on your feet. Bed. Now. Morning's soon enough for declarations. They parted at Evelyn's door, neither quite ready to let go, but both knowing they must. Cole's fingers lingered on hers, his eyes holding a question he wasn't quite ready to ask. Tomorrow, she said softly. We'll talk tomorrow. Figure things out tomorrow. Tonight. Just rest. Tomorrow, he agreed. Then, so quietly she almost missed it. Thank you for seeing me. The real me. Not just the man who's got his life together, but the one who's still broken in places. Thank you for staying anyway. Before she could respond, he was gone, disappearing into his own room. Evelyn stood in the hallway for a long moment, her hand pressed against her chest where her heart beat too fast and too hard. Tomorrow, she thought. Tomorrow they would talk. Tomorrow they would face the damage the fire had wrought and figure out what came next. But tonight, she let herself feel the full weight of what had happened. The fear, the relief, the undeniable pull toward a man she'd known for less than a week, but who'd somehow become essential to her in ways that defied logic. In her room, she stood at the window and looked out at the darkness. Somewhere to the south, embers were still cooling, the earth still smoking from the violence that had nearly consumed everything Cole had built. But they'd stopped it. Together, Cole with his leadership, Evelyn with her steady hands and stubborn heart, all of them with sheer determination and refusal to surrender. She thought about what Cole had said, about losing the ranch feeling like losing Sarah all over again. She understood that now. The land wasn't just dirt and grass. It was memory made solid, love transformed into something that could be touched and tended. Losing it would have been like erasing proof that Sarah had ever existed, that their dreams had ever mattered. But they hadn't lost it. 60 acres burned was 60 acres that could be replanted, damage that could be repaired. And maybe that was the lesson the fire had taught them both, that surviving wasn't the same as being unscathed, that you could lose pieces of yourself and still keep going, that broken didn't mean beaten. Evelyn climbed into bed, her body finally demanding the rest she'd denied it all day. Her last thought before sleep claimed her was simple and true. She was falling in love with Cole Maddox. Maybe had already fallen. And tomorrow, if she was brave enough, she would tell him so. Morning light filtered through the curtains with a gentleness that seemed at odds with everything they'd survived. Evelyn woke slowly, her body cataloging aches and pains, the persistent throb in her ankle, the soreness in her shoulders from hours of tension, the bone-deep fatigue that came from pushing past exhaustion into something like determination. But beneath all that was something else, something warm and insistent that pulled at her chest and made her think of blue-gray eyes and bandaged hands and promises made in firelight. She dressed carefully in Sarah's green dress, which had somehow become hers over these past days, and made her way downstairs. The house was quiet except for the sounds coming from the kitchen, the clink of dishes, the low murmur of voices, the smell of coffee, and something baking. Martha was at the stove, and Cole sat at the kitchen table with his injured arm resting on the surface, his good hand wrapped around a coffee cup. He looked up when Evelyn entered, and the smile that crossed his face was tired but genuine, reaching his eyes in a way that made her breath catch. "Morning," he said, his voice still rough with sleep. "How's the ankle?" "Complaining, but functional." "How's the arm?" "About the same." He gestured to the chair beside him. "Martha's making biscuits. Real ones, not the hardtack we've been surviving on." "Someone needs proper food after what you two put yourselves through yesterday," Martha said without turning around. "Honestly, the pair of you, running around on injuries like you've got something to prove." "We had a fire to fight," Cole pointed out mildly. "And you fought it. Now you rest and heal, or I'll tie you both to your beds." She turned, wielding a wooden spoon like a weapon. "Don't think I won't." Evelyn and Cole exchanged glances, and suddenly they were both fighting smiles like guilty children. The absurdity of it, being scolded by Martha after everything they'd been through, struck them both at the same moment, and laughter bubbled up, helpless and relieved. "What's so funny?" Martha demanded, but she was smiling too. "Nothing," Evelyn managed. "Just everything. Yesterday we were fighting for our lives, and today you're threatening us with a spoon." "Life goes on," Martha said simply. "Fire or no fire, people still need feeding. Might as well laugh while doing it." She set plates of biscuits and eggs in front of them. "Now eat, both of you. And then Cole, you're going to show Evelyn around the property properly, the parts that aren't burned anyway." "Martha, I have work to do. The fence lines need checking, and the cattle can wait a few hours. You've got good hands for that. What you need to do is keep the promise you made to Miss Evelyn about riding again." Martha fixed him with a look that brooked no argument. "Or were those just pretty words you said in a storm?" Cole's jaw tightened, but not with anger. With something else. Recognition, maybe, or acceptance. He looked at Evelyn, and in his eyes she saw the question. Was she ready? Did she want this? "I'd like that," Evelyn said quietly. "If you're well enough. If you think I'm ready. Your ankle's healed enough, and you've been walking on it more than you should have yesterday. Might as well test it properly." He stood, carrying his plate to the sink despite Martha's tisking. "Give me an hour to check on the crew and make sure everything's running smooth. Then meet me at the barn." He left before Evelyn could respond, and she turned to Martha with raised eyebrows. Was that his way of saying yes? That was his way of being terrified and trying not to show it. Martha sat down with her own coffee, her expression knowing. "He's scared, honey. Not of you getting hurt. Well, maybe a little of that, but of what it means that he wants to do this with you, that he cares enough to keep promises, that he's feeling things he thought he'd buried with Sarah. Are you always this perceptive? Comes with age and observation. I've watched that man torture himself for 7 years, convinced he didn't deserve happiness because he couldn't save his wife. Now here you come, falling out of a storm like some kind of sign from the universe, and suddenly he's got reasons to smile again. That's terrifying for someone who's made peace with being alone." Evelyn traced the rim of her coffee cup, considering Martha's words. "I'm scared too. I've known him less than a week. By any reasonable measure, this is too fast, too intense. But when I think about leaving, about going back to my father's ranch and never seeing Cole again," she couldn't finish the thought. "Then don't leave. Not yet. Give this thing between you time to grow or fade naturally. Forcing decisions before they're ready just makes them harder." Martha patted her hand. "Now finish your breakfast. You'll need your strength if you're really going to ride today." The hour passed with agonizing slowness. Evelyn helped Martha with dishes, then moved to the parlor where she could see the barn from the window. She watched Cole move among his men, gesturing with his good arm, checking horses, his posture radiating the confidence of a man in his element. Several times he glanced toward the house, and once their eyes met across the distance. He lifted his hand in a small wave, and she returned it, feeling foolish and giddy and more alive than she had in years. Finally, he broke away from the crew and headed toward the house. Evelyn met him at the door, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Ready?" he asked. "Ready." They walked to the barn in comfortable silence, their shoulders almost touching. Inside, the familiar smells of hay and horse and leather wrapped around Evelyn like a homecoming. Juniper was in one of the stalls, and the mare whinnied when she saw her mistress, tossing her head with obvious pleasure. "Hey, girl," Evelyn murmured, running her hands over the horse's neck. "I've missed you too." "She's been restless," Cole said, moving to prepare tack. "Knows something's different. Horses are sensitive to change." "So are people." Evelyn helped with the saddle, their hands brushing as they worked. The contact sent sparks up her arm, and from the way Cole's breath caught, he'd felt it too. They led Juniper out into the yard where the morning sun painted everything gold. The mare danced sideways, eager after days of inactivity, and Evelyn felt an answering eagerness rise in her own chest. She'd been away from riding for a week, the longest stretch since she'd learned to sit a horse at age 4. But there was fear too. Memory of falling, of the world tilting and the ground rushing up and pain exploding through her body. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the saddle horn. "Hey." Cole's voice was gentle. He moved to stand beside her, his presence solid and grounding. "You don't have to do this today. There's no shame in waiting." "I know, but I want to. I need to." She looked up at him. "Will you help me mount? My ankle's still a bit weak." "Of course." His hand settled at her waist, strong and sure despite the bandages. "On 3. 1, 2. On 3 he lifted, and Evelyn found herself in the saddle, her legs automatically finding the stirrups, her body remembering what her mind had feared it might forget. For a moment she just sat there, breathing, feeling the familiar sensation of horse beneath her, powerful and alive. Juniper shifted, and Evelyn's hands tightened on the reins before she consciously relaxed them. "How does it feel?" Cole asked, one hand resting on her knee in a gesture that was both protective and reassuring. "Strange. Good. Scary." She laughed shakily. "All of it at once." "That's normal. You took a bad fall. Your body remembers even if your mind's ready to forget." He stepped back, giving her space. "Take it slow. Just sit for a minute. Let yourself remember why you love this." So Evelyn sat, eyes closed, feeling the sun on her face and the horse beneath her. She remembered riding across her father's fields with her hair streaming behind her, the sense of absolute freedom that came from moving fast across open land. She remembered morning rides before the world woke up, just her and her horse and the endless Montana sky. She remembered why she'd been so desperate to reach her father that she'd ridden into a storm despite the danger. Because riding wasn't just transportation, it was who she was. And she refused to let fear take that from her. "I'm ready," she said, opening her eyes to find Cole watching her with an expression she couldn't quite name. "Let's ride." He swung up onto Midnight with fluid grace despite his injured arm, settling into the saddle like he'd been born there. "We'll take it easy. Just walk the fence line near the house. Nothing fancy." They rode out side by side, and with each step Evelyn felt confidence returning. Her ankle twinged occasionally, but it held. Her body remembered the rhythm, the subtle communication between rider and horse that was more instinct than thought. And beside her, Cole matched her pace, close enough to help if needed, but far enough to let her do this herself. The morning was beautiful in the way only Montana mornings could be. Crisp and clear, the air so clean it almost hurt to breathe. They rode past the corral, past the bunkhouse where a few hands waved greeting, out toward the fence line that marked the boundary between Cole's property and the open range beyond. "How does it look?" Evelyn asked, nodding toward the south where smoke had darkened the sky just yesterday. "The burned land. Raw, black, like someone took a razor to something beautiful and just scarred it." Cole's voice was heavy. "But it'll recover. Grass is resilient. By next spring you won't hardly know there'd been a fire. Not to look at, anyway." "But you'll know." "Yeah, I'll know." He was quiet for a moment. 60 acres doesn't sound like much when you say it fast, but it's a whole season's grazing. Money I was counting on to pay debts, make improvements, maybe finally get ahead instead of just surviving. "What will you do?" "What I always do. Adapt. Cut corners somewhere else. Sell off a few head I was planning to keep. Make it work." He glanced at her. "I'm good at making it work. Had lots of practice." They rode in silence for a while following the fence line. Evelyn could see the burned area now, a dark scar on the landscape, still smoking faintly in places. It was worse than she'd imagined. 60 acres was almost everything Cole had built in the south pasture. The fences were gone, reduced to charred posts. The grass was ash. Even some of the trees along the creek had been scorched, their branches reaching toward the sky like blackened fingers. "Oh, Cole," she breathed. "I'm so sorry." He sat straight in his saddle, his jaw tight. "Could have been worse. That's what I keep telling myself. Could have lost everything. Could have lost men. Could have lost—" He stopped, but they both knew what he'd been about to say. "Could have lost you." Evelyn guided Juniper closer until their legs were almost touching. "You didn't, though. Lose any of it. The fire's out, the men are safe, and I'm here, right here, beside you." Cole reached across the space between them, his bandaged hand finding hers. "I know. And that's the only thing making this bearable. Knowing I'm not facing it alone." He squeezed her fingers. "Is that selfish? To be glad you're here even though you should have been home with your father days ago? If it is, then I'm selfish too, because I'm glad I'm here. Glad I fell in that storm and ended up at your door. Glad for every moment since, even the terrifying ones. She held his gaze, willing him to understand what she was really saying. Especially the terrifying ones. They showed me what matters. And what matters, Evelyn Grant? People. Connection. Being seen and seen in return. Building something that lasts even when the world tries to burn it down. She gestured toward the scorched earth. You could have given up yesterday, could have let the fire take everything. But you fought, and you'll rebuild, because that's who you are, someone who keeps fighting even when it would be easier to surrender. Something shifted in Cole's expression, surprise, then recognition, then something deeper that made her pulse quicken. When you put it like that, I sound almost noble. Truth is, I'm just too stubborn to know when I'm beat. There's nobility in stubbornness, in refusing to let circumstances define you. She smiled. Must be why we get along. We're both too stubborn for our own good. Is that what we do, get along? His thumb traced circles on the back of her hand, because from where I'm sitting, it feels like more than that. Evelyn's heart was in her throat. This was it. The conversation they'd been circling for days, the words that had hung unspoken between them since that first night when he'd carried her through the storm. She could deflect, make light, retreat behind propriety and reasonable caution. Or she could be brave. It is more than that, she said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. At least for me. I don't know what to call it yet. We've only known each other a week, which is insane by any reasonable standard. But Cole, I care about you. More than makes sense, more than I probably should. And I think you feel the same way. He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he dismounted with his careful, one-armed grace and came to stand beside Juniper. His hand settled at Evelyn's waist, and she let him lift her down, suddenly glad to be on solid ground for this conversation. I do, he said simply, his hand still at her waist, his face inches from hers. Feel the same way, and you're right, it's insane. A week ago, I was convinced I'd spend the rest of my life alone, that Sarah was my one chance at happiness, and I'd lost it. Then you showed up, stubborn and brave and so damn alive, and suddenly I'm thinking about futures again, about possibilities I thought were dead. That scares you, terrifies me, because what if I'm wrong? What if this is just proximity and circumstance and gratitude masquerading as something deeper? What if you go back to your father's ranch and realize you were caught up in the drama of it all, the storm, the fire, the intensity, and that in regular life we're just two people who have nothing in common? He stopped, his throat working. Or worse, what if I'm right about what this is and I lose you anyway? I don't know if I could survive that twice. Evelyn reached up, framing his face with her hands, feeling the rasp of his unshaven jaw against her palms. Cole Maddox, listen to me. I'm not Sarah. I'm not going to die in childbirth or disappear in the night. I'm standing right here, solid and real, and I'm telling you I want this. Whatever this is, I want to see where it goes. Does that guarantee it'll work? No, but I'd rather try and fail than spend the rest of my life wondering what if. You sound awfully sure for someone who's only known me a week. Maybe I am sure. Maybe when it's right, you just know. My mother used to say that about my father, that she knew within days that he was the one. I used to think she was exaggerating, being romantic, but now, she smiled, her eyes searching his. Now I think maybe she was just honest. Cole's hand slid from her waist to her back, drawing her closer. Evelyn, He stopped, swallowed, tried again. I'm not good at this. Haven't had to be good at it in 7 years. I don't know how to court someone properly, how to take things slow and careful. But I want to try. For you, I want to try. Then start by kissing me, she whispered. We can figure out the rest as we go. For a heartbeat, he just looked at her, his eyes searching hers for doubt or hesitation. Then he closed the distance between them, his lips finding hers in a kiss that was gentle and fierce all at once. Tender because he was afraid of hurting her, fierce because he'd been holding back for days and could no longer contain it. Evelyn melted into him, her arms winding around his neck, careful of his injured arm but desperate to be closer. The kiss deepened, and she tasted coffee and something sweeter, felt the warmth of his body against hers, the solid strength of his chest, and the racing of his heart that matched her own. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Cole rested his forehead against hers. "Well," he said, his voice rough, "that's definitely more than getting along." She laughed, giddy and breathless. "Definitely." "So, what now? Where do we go from here?" "I don't know. But I think the first step is me going to see my father. I've been gone a week, Cole. He needs to know I'm all right, that I'm staying of my own choice rather than obligation, and," as she hesitated, "and you should come with me. Meet him properly. If this is going somewhere, if we're really doing this, he should know." Cole pulled back enough to see her face. "You want me to meet your father? As what exactly?" "As the man who saved my life. As the man who's become important to me, and as the man I'm—" She stopped, not quite ready to say the word that hovered on her tongue. Love. It was too soon, too much, even if it felt true. "The man you're considering," Cole finished gently. "For something permanent." "Yes. Is that too much pressure, too fast?" "Probably." He smiled, tracing her cheek with his thumb. "But I don't care. If you're brave enough to say it, I'm brave enough to face Henry Grant and tell him I have intentions toward his daughter. God help me." "He'll like you. My father respects hard work and honesty. You've got both in spades." "Let's hope you're right, because the last thing I need after losing 60 acres is to get shot by my girlfriend's father." "Girlfriend?" Evelyn tested the word, found she liked the sound of it. "Is that what I am?" "If you want to be. Or we could go with courting prospect if that sounds more proper. Or woman I'm desperately trying not to fall harder for, even though it's clearly too late." He grinned at her expression. "Too honest?" "Never. I like honesty. Saves time." She kissed him again, quick and sweet. "Now let's ride back before Martha sends a search party. And then tomorrow we'll go see my father." They rode home side by side, and this time there was no hesitation in Evelyn's seat, no fear in her hands on the reins. She'd faced the thing that scared her and come through stronger. Not unchanged, she'd never be careless in storms again, never take safety for granted, but not broken either. Just more aware of how quickly everything could shift, how precious each moment was. Cole kept glancing over at her as they rode, and each time she caught him, he'd smile in a way that made her stomach flip. This man who'd pulled her from a ravine was now looking at her like she was something precious, something to be protected and cherished, and maybe even loved. At the barn, they untacked the horses together, working in comfortable synchronicity that spoke of compatible rhythms and shared understanding. Cole's injured arm slowed him down, and Evelyn found herself helping without being asked, anticipating what he needed before he had to say it. "We're good at this," he observed, watching her hang up Juniper's bridle. "Working together. Most people clash when they try to share tasks. You give me space when I need it, step in when I don't. That's partnership. Reading each other, adapting. My parents were like that. They could work a whole day without speaking and still accomplish everything that needed doing just because they understood each other's rhythms." She moved to stand in front of him. "I think we could have that. Are having that, actually. It doesn't take years to build. Sometimes it's just there." Cole pulled her close with his good arm, kissing the top of her head. "You're making me believe in things I thought were gone. That's a powerful gift, Evelyn Grant. I hope I'm worthy of it." "You are. And I'll keep telling you until you believe it." They walked back to the house hand in hand, and if Martha noticed their joined hands and matching smiles, she was wise enough not to comment beyond a knowing look and a satisfied nod. That evening they sat on the porch as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and purple that seemed impossible after the smoke and fear of recent days. Cole's arm was around her shoulders, her head resting in the hollow of his shoulder, both of them content to simply exist together without need for conversation. "I keep thinking about tomorrow," Cole said eventually. "Meeting your father. What if he doesn't approve? What if he thinks I'm too old for you or too poor or just generally not good enough? Then I'll remind him that his opinion matters but doesn't control me. I'm 26 years old, Cole, old enough to make my own choices." She tilted her head to look at him. "But he will approve.
I know my father. He values character over everything else. And you, Cole Maddox, have character in spades. I'm 37. That's 11 years older than you. My mother was 15 years younger than my father. Age is just a number if everything else aligns. She poked his chest gently. Stop borrowing trouble. Tomorrow will be fine. You're awfully confident. One of us has to be. You're busy catastrophizing. She smiled at his expression. It's going to be all right, Cole. Trust me. Kissed her temple. I do trust you. That's the scariest part of all of this. How much I trust you after such a short time. I'd follow you into a storm all over again if you asked. Let's hope it doesn't come to that. I've had my fill of storms for a while. They sat in comfortable silence until the stars began to emerge, pinpricks of light in the darkening sky. Martha called them in for dinner, and they went reluctantly, neither quite ready to break the spell of the evening. Over Martha's pot roast, which was somehow both hearty and tender, exactly what they needed, the three of them talked about practical matters. The ranch's recovery, what needed doing in the coming weeks, which cattle would need to be moved to fresh pasture now that the south section was gone. I'll need to hire extra hands for the fall work, Cole said, pushing food around his plate. Can't afford it, but can't afford not to either. The cattle won't wait because I'm short on money. What if you didn't have to hire anyone? Evelyn said slowly, an idea forming. What if you had someone who could help without needing wages? Both Cole and Martha looked at her. What are you suggesting? Cole asked. I'm suggesting that I'm a perfectly capable ranch hand. I grew up doing this work. I can mend fence, move cattle, handle equipment. Why couldn't I help? Because you have your own life, your father's ranch, your responsibilities. My father has a full crew. He doesn't need me the way you do. She leaned forward. Cole, I'm not proposing anything improper. I'll stay here as your guest, help with the work during the day, and we'll figure out the rest as we go. It's practical and helpful, and we'll set every tongue in the county wagging, Martha interjected, though she didn't sound disapproving. A single woman staying at a bachelor's ranch without a chaperone present at all times? The scandal. I'm here, Martha pointed out. You're here, but not always around. People will talk. Let them talk, Evelyn said firmly. I don't care about gossip. I care about helping someone who needs it and spending time with someone I want to be near. If that's scandalous, so be it. Cole was watching her with an expression that was equal parts admiration and concern. Evelyn, I can't ask you to sacrifice your reputation for... You're not asking. I'm offering. There's a difference. She reached across the table, taking his hand. Besides, my reputation has survived worse. Remember when I told that banker he was an idiot in front of half of Helena society? Scandal. And yet here I am, still invited to church socials. That's different. No, it's not. It's me making choices based on what I think is right, rather than what people think is proper. I've never been good at proper, Cole. Why start now? Martha was trying not to smile. The girl has a point, and if we're being practical, the help would be invaluable. Though I still say tongues will wag. Then we'll give them something worth wagging about, Cole said suddenly, his grip on Evelyn's hand tightening. We'll make it official. Not hiding, not sneaking around. I'll court you properly, in front of God and the county and anyone else who cares to watch. And when we're ready, if we get there, I'll ask your father for permission to marry you like a gentleman should. Evelyn's breath caught. Cole, I know it's fast. I know we said we'd take time to figure this out. But I also know that I'm tired of being afraid. Tired of letting fear make my decisions. He stood, still holding her hand, pulling her up with him. I want this. Want you. Want a future that includes watching you ride across these fields and arguing about books and facing whatever storms come next together. So yes, stay, help, be here. And let me court you properly so the whole county knows my intentions are honorable, even if the timeline's unconventional. Evelyn felt tears prickling her eyes. That's the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. It's the truth. I'm not good at pretty speeches, but I'm good at meaning what I say. He cupped her face, his thumb brushing away a tear that had escaped. So what do you say, Evelyn Grant? Will you let me court you? Will you stay and help me rebuild and see where this thing between us leads? Yes, she whispered. Yes to all of it.
They kissed there in Martha's kitchen, with the housekeeper looking on with satisfaction and the remains of pot roast growing cold on the table. And when they finally broke apart, both smiling like fools, Martha cleared her throat. Well then, I suppose that's settled. Now both of you, sit back down and finish eating. Can't rebuild a ranch or conduct a proper courtship on empty stomachs. They obeyed, laughing, and the rest of the evening passed in a warm blur of planning and possibility. They'd ride to Henry Grant's ranch tomorrow. Cole would formally ask permission to court Evelyn. She'd gather some of her things and return here to help with the work. They'd face whatever gossip came with heads held high, secure in the knowledge that what they had was real and worth any social cost. Later, when Evelyn was back in her room preparing for bed, she heard a soft knock on her door. She opened it to find Cole standing there, looking suddenly uncertain. I just wanted to say goodnight, properly, and to make sure you meant what you said downstairs, that you're really staying. I meant it, every word. She stepped closer, her hands finding his. I'm staying, Cole, for as long as you'll have me. His kiss was soft, reverent, a promise without words. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright with emotion he didn't try to hide. Thank you, he said quietly, for writing again, for being brave, for choosing this even when it's complicated. Thank you for keeping your promise, for seeing me as an equal, for making me believe in possibility again. She squeezed his hands. Now go rest. Tomorrow's a big day. Tomorrow, he agreed. Then, with a final kiss to her forehead, he was gone. Evelyn closed the door and leaned against it, her heart full to bursting. A week ago, she'd been terrified and alone in a storm. Now she was standing in a borrowed nightgown in a house that was starting to feel like home, planning a future with a man she barely knew but somehow understood completely. It was madness. It was perfect, and she wouldn't change a single moment of it. The morning of reckoning arrived with unseasonable warmth, as if Montana itself had decided to bless their journey. Evelyn woke early, nerves and anticipation making sleep impossible past dawn. She dressed with particular care in the green dress that had become hers, pinning her hair up in a style that was neat without being fussy. In the mirror, she looked like someone straddling two worlds, the practical ranch woman she'd always been, and something softer, something new that Cole had somehow called forth. Downstairs, she found him already dressed and pacing the kitchen with the restless energy of a man facing judgment. He'd shaved carefully around the healing scrapes on his jaw, and his shirt was pressed. Martha's doing, no doubt. His injured arm was still bandaged, but he wore the sling with a kind of resigned dignity that made her smile. You look terrified, she observed, pouring herself coffee. I am terrified. Your father's going to take one look at me and decide I'm too old, too poor, too damaged, and generally not good enough for his daughter. And he'll be right on at least 3 of those counts. He won't, and you're not. Evelyn set down her cup and crossed to him, smoothing the collar of his shirt. Cole, my father's been alone with his grief for 14 years. He understands loss. He understands building something from nothing and fighting to keep it. He'll see you for what you are, a good man doing his best. That's all anyone can ask. What if doing my best isn't enough? Then we'll deal with it together. But it won't come to that. She kissed him softly. Trust me. Trust us. Martha bustled in with a basket packed full of food. For the road and for your father. Man who's been laid up with an injury appreciates good cooking. She fixed Cole with a stern look. Now you listen to me, Cole Maddox. You go in there with your head up and your intentions clear. Henry Grant's a reasonable man. He'll see what I see, that you're good for his daughter and she's good for you. Don't borrow trouble before it arrives. Yes, ma'am, Cole said, managing a smile, though I notice everyone keeps telling me not to worry while also acknowledging this is terrifying. Because it is terrifying doesn't mean it won't work out. Martha shooed them toward the door. Now go on. The longer you wait, the worse it'll get. And Evelyn, you bring back whatever things you need. You're staying here now, and that's that. They rode out side by side, Cole on Midnight and Evelyn on Juniper, who pranced with pleasure at being back under saddle. The journey to the Grant Ranch was perhaps 90 minutes at an easy pace, and they took their time, neither eager to rush toward uncertainty. The land between the two properties was classic Montana, rolling grassland giving way to pine-covered hills, with the mountains standing sentinel in the distance. They passed other ranches, and twice Cole lifted his hand in greeting to neighbors who stared with undisguised curiosity at the sight of Henry Grant's daughter riding with Cole Maddox. By nightfall, Evelyn knew, half the county would be speculating about what it meant. Let them speculate. She rode beside Cole with her head high, refusing to act as if they had anything to hide. "I keep running through what I'm going to say," Cole admitted as they crested a hill that gave them their first view of the Grant Ranch in the valley below. "Trying to find words that don't sound either too presumptuous or too timid. This would be easier if there was a script for asking permission to court a woman you've known for a week but are already half in love with." Evelyn's heart stuttered at his casual admission. Half in love? He glanced at her, and something in his expression stole her breath. "Maybe more than half. But I'm trying to pace myself, failing, but trying." "Good, because I'm failing too." She reached across the space between their horses, and he met her halfway, their fingers tangling together. "We're in this together, remember? Whatever he says, whatever happens, we face it as a team." "As a team," he echoed, squeezing her hand before releasing it as they began the descent toward the ranch. The Grant property was larger than Cole's, more established, with a main house that spoke of decades of success and careful management. Cattle grazed in multiple pastures, and Evelyn could see ranch hands working in the distance. This was the empire her father had built through sweat and determination, the legacy he hoped to pass down to her someday. And she was about to tell him she'd found something, someone, she wanted more. They'd barely entered the yard when the front door flew open and Henry Grant himself appeared, leaning heavily on a cane but moving with determination. He was a big man, made bigger by force of personality, with iron gray hair and eyes the same warm brown as his daughter's. His face lit up at the sight of Evelyn, then shifted to confusion and curiosity as he registered Cole's presence. "Evie! Thank God. When word came you'd been injured but were safe, I've been half out of my mind wanting to see for myself." He reached them as they dismounted, and despite his injury pulled Evelyn into a fierce embrace. "Let me look at you. Are you all right? The ankle? They said you'd sprained it badly." "I'm fine, Papa. Completely healed, see?" She put weight on her ankle, demonstrating. "Cole took excellent care of me. His housekeeper, too. I couldn't have asked for better nursing." Henry's attention shifted to Cole, his expression assessing. "Cole Maddox. I know of you. Young Jensen spoke highly of your character after you helped him through pneumonia last winter. And I heard about the fire. 60 acres lost. That's rough. You have my sympathies." Cole extended his good hand, and Henry shook it firmly. "Thank you, sir. And thank you for the advice you gave me when I was starting out. That guidance about water rights saved me considerable trouble." "You're welcome. Though I notice you've got my daughter, which makes me wonder if you're here for more advice or something else entirely." Henry's tone was mild, but his eyes were sharp. "Why don't you both come inside? We can talk properly over coffee, and Evelyn can tell me exactly what happened during that storm." Inside, the house was exactly as Evelyn remembered, comfortable and lived in, with her mother's touch still visible in the curtains and cushions despite 14 years of absence. They settled in the parlor, and a housekeeper Evelyn didn't recognize brought coffee and Martha's basket of food. "Mrs. Henderson," Henry explained, catching Evelyn's questioning look. "Hired her 2 months ago when my hip started acting up. Needed someone to manage the house properly." He gestured for them to sit. "Now, Evie, start from the beginning. The storm, the fall, all of it." So Evelyn told the story, with Cole occasionally adding details she'd missed. Henry listened in silence, his face growing paler as she described falling down the ravine, darker when she explained about Cole pulling her to safety. By the time she reached the fire and her own insistence on helping despite her injury, Henry was gripping his cane so hard his knuckles were white. "You could have died," he said when she finished, "multiple times. If Cole hadn't been there, if the fire had jumped the creek, if—" He stopped, his throat working. "Thank God for small mercies and good men in the right place at the right time." "I was lucky," Evelyn agreed, "in more ways than one." Henry's eyes moved between them, Noting their proximity on the settee, the way Cole's hand rested near hers, though not quite touching, the air of connection that hummed between them despite their attempts at propriety. "I see," he said slowly, "and now you're here, together. Which suggests this visit is about more than just returning my daughter home." He fixed Cole with a direct look. "You have something you want to ask me, Mr. Maddox?" Cole straightened, and Evelyn felt pride surge through her chest at the way he met her father's gaze without flinching. "Yes, sir, I do. I'd like your permission to court your daughter, officially and openly, with honorable intentions. After a week of acquaintance." "Yes, sir. I know how that sounds. But in that week, I've come to know Evelyn's character, her strength, her kindness, and her courage. She's extraordinary, Mr. Grant, and I'd be a fool to let her walk out of my life without at least trying to build something lasting." "You're 11 years older than she is." "I am. You've been widowed. You lost a child. That's heavy baggage to bring to a new relationship." "It is," Cole agreed, his voice steady. "I won't pretend otherwise. But I've done the work of grieving, sir. I've made my peace with loss as much as anyone can. I'm not looking for someone to replace Sarah or to fill a void. I'm looking to build something new with Evelyn because she makes me want things I thought I'd given up on. Future things. Good things." Henry was quiet for a long moment, studying Cole with the penetrating gaze that had intimidated countless men over the years. Then he turned to Evelyn. "And you, daughter, this is what you want? Not gratitude, not some misguided sense of obligation because he helped you?" "It's what I want," Evelyn said firmly. "I know it's fast, Papa. I know it looks impulsive, but when have you ever known me to make decisions lightly? I've thought about this, felt it in my bones. Cole's a good man, and what we have is real. I'd like the chance to see where it goes. Even if that means scandal? A single woman staying at a bachelor's ranch will set tongues wagging from here to Helena. Martha's there as chaperone, and I don't care about gossip. I never have." Evelyn leaned forward. "Papa, you taught me to judge people by their character, not their circumstances. You taught me to make decisions based on what's right, not what's convenient or proper. Cole needs help rebuilding after the fire, and I can provide it. We want to spend time together, see if this connection we feel can grow into something permanent. That's honest and practical. If people want to make it scandalous, that's their problem, not ours." Henry's expression softened, and suddenly Evelyn saw past the stern father to the man who'd raised her alone, who taught her to be strong and independent even when it meant she'd eventually make choices he might not understand. "You sound like your mother," he said quietly. "She said almost exactly those words when I told her people would talk about us marrying so quickly after we met. Told me she didn't care what anyone thought, as long as she knew her own heart." He smiled, bittersweet. "She was right, of course. Usually was, and I suspect you've inherited that particular wisdom along with her stubbornness. So that's a yes?" Evelyn held her breath. "That's a conditional yes. Conditional on Mr. Maddox answering one more question honestly." Henry turned to Cole. "What are your intentions long term? Are we talking about courtship that might lead to marriage, or are you just looking for companionship and help with ranch work?" Cole didn't hesitate. "Marriage, sir. If we get there, if things continue the way they've started. I'm not interested in half measures or casual arrangements. When I said my intentions were honorable, I meant it. I want to court Evelyn properly, give us both time to be sure this is what we want. And then, if she'll have me, I want to marry her. Build a life together. Maybe even a family if that's something she wants too." The declaration hung in the air, more definitive than anything Cole had said, even to Evelyn herself. She felt her eyes sting with sudden tears, but they were good tears, happy tears, the kind that came from hearing your deepest hopes spoken aloud by someone who meant them. Henry was quiet for what felt like an eternity. Then he set down his coffee cup with decisive finality. "All right, you have my permission. Court my daughter, Mr. Maddox. Treat her well, keep your intentions clear, and if you hurt her, know that I'm an excellent shot even with a bad hip." The threat was delivered with a smile, but there was steel beneath it. Cole's relief was palpable. "Thank you, sir. I promise you won't regret this." "See that I don't." Henry stood, wincing slightly as his hip protested. "Now, Evelyn, I assume you're here to gather some things. How long do you plan to stay at the Maddox Ranch?" "As long as I'm needed. Through the rebuilding, at least. Maybe longer, depending on... She gestured vaguely, encompassing everything they didn't know yet about their future. Then take what you need. Your room's exactly as you left it. Henry moved toward the door, then paused. Mr. Maddox, I'd like a word. Alone. Evelyn, give us a few minutes. Evelyn glanced at Cole, who nodded almost imperceptibly. She excused herself, heading upstairs to her childhood room while trying not to worry about what her father wanted to say privately. Her room was indeed unchanged. The same quilt on the bed, the same books on the shelves, the same view of the mountains from the window where she'd spent countless hours daydreaming about the future. It felt simultaneously familiar and foreign, as if she'd already moved on emotionally, even though physically she'd only been gone a week. She packed quickly and efficiently, practical clothes for ranch work, a few nicer dresses for town, personal items and mementos she couldn't bear to leave behind. Her mother's locket, the book of poetry her father had given her for her 16th birthday, a photograph of her parents on their wedding day, both young and hopeful and achingly alive. Downstairs, she could hear the murmur of male voices but couldn't make out words. She forced herself not to eavesdrop, trusting that whatever her father needed to say, Cole could handle it. 20 minutes later, footsteps on the stairs announced Cole's arrival. He appeared in her doorway looking slightly overwhelmed but not distressed. "Everything all right?" she asked. "Your father gave me what he called the essential speech about respecting his daughter. It was thorough and occasionally terrifying, but fair." Cole moved into the room, taking in the space that had shaped her. "He also said if I ever make you cry from anything other than happiness, he'll personally ensure I regret it." That sounds like him, protective but not controlling. Evelyn closed her trunk. "Did he say anything else?" "He told me about your mother, how they met, how fast they fell, how everyone said it wouldn't last, but they proved them all wrong. He said sometimes the heart knows before the head catches up, and the trick is trusting that knowledge even when it seems insane." Cole crossed to her, taking her hands. "He said he sees that same certainty in you now, and it scares him because he knows what it means, that you've made your choice and nothing he says will change it. He's right. I have made my choice." She squeezed his hands. "You, us, whatever comes next, I choose it willingly. Even if it's hard, even if rebuilding the ranch takes years and we struggle for money and face gossip and judgment. Especially then. I'm not afraid of hard work or sacrifice, Cole. I'm only afraid of regret, of looking back and wishing I'd been brave enough to try." She stepped closer until they were nearly touching. "Are you having second thoughts? Because if you are, tell me now. Don't let this go forward out of obligation, or because you feel you owe me something." "No second thoughts. Well, maybe a few terrified thoughts, but not doubts. Not about you." He released one of her hands to cup her face. "Evelyn Grant, you walked into my life during a storm and somehow made everything clearer instead of more chaotic. I don't know what I did to deserve this second chance, but I'm not fool enough to waste it." They kissed there in her childhood room, surrounded by memories of who she'd been and the promise of who she was becoming. When they finally broke apart, both were smiling. "We should go," Evelyn said reluctantly, "before my father decides to give you another speech." They loaded her trunk onto Juniper, securing it carefully, then said their goodbyes. Henry embraced his daughter tightly, whispering in her ear, "Be happy, Evie. That's all I've ever wanted for you. Be happy and don't settle for less than everything." "I won't, Papa, I promise." To Cole, Henry extended his hand again, but this time the shake was warmer, more accepting. "You take care of her, Mr. Maddox, and take care of yourself too. My daughter won't thank you for sacrificing your health out of some misguided sense of duty." "I'll remember that, sir. Thank you again for trusting me with her." They rode away from the Grant Ranch in the early afternoon, the sun warm on their backs and the future stretching before them like the endless Montana sky. Evelyn felt lighter than she had in years, as if some burden she hadn't known she was carrying had finally lifted. "That went better than I expected," Cole admitted once they were out of sight of the house. "I was prepared for him to throw me out. Or worse, agree reluctantly while making it clear I wasn't good enough. My father's too smart for games like that. He knows forced compliance never works." Evelyn shifted in her saddle. "He also knows me well enough to recognize when I've made up my mind. Trying to change it would just make me more determined. Remind me never to try to change your mind about anything important. Good policy. I'm extremely stubborn when I think I'm right. I've noticed. It's one of your more endearing qualities. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, each lost in their own thoughts. Evelyn found herself thinking about the future in concrete terms now, not just abstract possibility, but actual plans. Where she would sleep at the ranch, what work needed doing first, how they would navigate the social complexities of their unconventional arrangement. "Cole," she said eventually, "what happens when we get back? Practically speaking, where do I sleep? How do we present this to your crew? You keep the guest room you've been using. We conduct ourselves with absolute propriety where anyone can see, even though Martha knows the truth of how we feel. We work together during the day, you helping with whatever needs doing, me trying not to hover. And in the evenings, we sit on that porch and talk until we run out of words." He glanced at her. "Does that sound acceptable?" "It sounds perfect, though I should warn you, I'm not much for hovering either. If you assign me a task, I'll do it my way. We might clash. Then we'll clash and figure out compromise. That's what partners do." He grinned. "Besides, watching you get fired up about the right way to mend fence sounds entertaining." "You haven't seen me fired up yet. Wait until you try to tell me I'm doing something wrong when I know I'm not." "Looking forward to it, actually. You're magnificent when you're certain about something." They continued trading banter and making plans, and by the time the Maddox Ranch came into view, Evelyn felt a surge of something she could only call homecoming. In the space of a week, this place had become important to her, not just because Cole was here, but because it represented something she'd been searching for without knowing it. Purpose, partnership, possibility. Martha was waiting on the porch, and her face broke into a delighted smile when she saw them approaching. "Well, how'd it go? Do I need to defend you from an angry father, or can we celebrate?" "You can celebrate," Evelyn called out as they rode into the yard. He gave his permission, reluctantly at first, but genuinely by the end. "Thank the Lord. I've been pacing all morning, worried Henry would be difficult." Martha came down to help with the horses. "And you brought back your things? You're staying properly then?" "I'm staying," Evelyn confirmed, dismounting with only the slightest twinge from her ankle. "Put me to work, Martha. I'm not one for sitting idle." Over the next few weeks, they settled into a rhythm that felt both natural and earned. Evelyn threw herself into ranch work with the competence of someone who'd been born to it. She mended fences alongside the hands, helped move cattle to fresh pasture, even assisted with the difficult work of clearing the burned section and preparing it for replanting come spring. Cole watched her with undisguised admiration and growing affection. She wasn't delicate or ornamental. She was strong and capable, matching his hands stride for stride, and occasionally outdoing them. More than once he heard Tommy mutter something about that Grant girl being tougher than half the crew, and it was meant as the highest compliment. In the evenings, true to his word, they sat on the porch and talked about everything and nothing, books and philosophy and the ranch and their childhoods and their dreams for the future. Cole told her about Sarah with less pain now, as if giving voice to those memories somehow eased their weight. Evelyn shared stories about her mother, about growing up the only child of a man who'd been determined to raise her to be both strong and kind. They kissed sometimes, sweet, stolen moments when Martha wasn't watching or had tactfully turned away. But mostly they just existed together, building something that felt solid and real and infinitely more valuable than rushed passion. The county gossip materialized exactly as expected. People talked about Evelyn Grant living at the Maddox place, about what it meant, about whether Cole was taking advantage or Evelyn was being foolish. But when Cole took her to church on Sunday, sitting beside her in the pew with his intentions clear for everyone to see, the talk shifted from scandalous to speculative. Were they courting? Would there be an engagement? When would he make it official? "Let them wonder," Evelyn said when Cole expressed frustration about the whispers. "We know what we're doing. That's enough." But Cole wanted more than enough. He wanted to give her certainty, security, proof that his promises weren't just words. 6 weeks after Evelyn had first fallen into his life during a storm, Cole rode into town with a specific purpose. He visited the jeweler, a man named Klein who'd been selling rings and watches to Montana ranchers for 30 years. "I'm looking for an engagement ring," Cole said without preamble. Something simple but beautiful, strong but elegant, like the woman it's for. Klein studied him with knowing eyes. This wouldn't be for Henry Grant's daughter, would it? The whole county's been watching you two. It would be, assuming she says yes. Son, from what I've heard, that woman fought a fire beside you and stitched up your arm without flinching. She's not going to say no. Klein pulled out a tray of rings. Now, let's find something worthy of her. They settled on a gold band with a small but flawless diamond, simple and classic. It wasn't ostentatious. Cole couldn't afford ostentatious after losing 60 acres, but it was beautiful, the kind of ring that would last a lifetime, that would sit comfortable on the hand of a woman who worked hard and loved harder. That evening, as the sun set in shades of amber and rose, Cole found Evelyn in the barn grooming Juniper. She looked up when he entered, her face lighting with the smile she saved just for him. Hey, I was just finishing up. Martha's making stew for dinner, and she threatened violence if we're late. Evelyn, wait. Before we go in, I have something I need to ask you. Cole's heart was hammering against his ribs, nerves making his mouth dry. Actually, there's something I need to say first. She set down the brush, giving him her full attention. All right, I'm listening. 7 weeks ago, I pulled you out of a ravine in a storm. At the time, I thought I was just helping someone in trouble. I had no idea I was saving my own life in the process. He moved closer, taking her hands in his. You changed everything, Evelyn. Made me remember what it feels like to want things, to hope for things, to believe that losing everything once doesn't mean you can't build something beautiful again. Cole, let me finish, please. He took a shaky breath. I know this is fast. I know we've only known each other a short time by conventional standards, but I also know my own heart, and it's sure about you, about us, about building a life together on this land, facing whatever storms come next side by side. He released one of her hands to pull the small box from his pocket. When he opened it, the diamond caught the last rays of sunlight, throwing tiny rainbows across the barn wall. Evelyn Grant, I know I promised you'd ride again, and you did, but I want to make you a different promise now. I promise to love you every day for the rest of my life, to be your partner in all things, to build something lasting with you, to never take a single moment for granted because I know how quickly everything can change. He dropped to one knee, his eyes finding hers. Will you marry me? For a heartbeat, Evelyn just stared at him, her eyes wide and bright with unshed tears. Then she was pulling him up, laughing and crying simultaneously. Yes, she said, her voice fierce with certainty. Yes, of course, yes. I love you, Cole Maddox. I think I have since you carried me through that storm, making impossible promises you somehow kept. He slid the ring onto her finger with trembling hands, then kissed her with all the love and relief and joy surging through his chest. She kissed him back with equal fervor, her arms winding around his neck, and for a long moment the world contracted to just the two of them and the promise they'd just made. When they finally broke apart, both were grinning like fools. We should tell Martha, Evelyn said, laughing. She'll be impossible if we keep this from her even 5 minutes. Then let's tell her, and then tomorrow we'll ride to your father's place and tell him. Make it official. Cole couldn't stop touching her, her face, her hair, her hand where his ring now sat on her finger. When do you want to get married? Spring? Summer? I'll wait as long as you want. Winter, Evelyn said immediately. I don't want to wait. Why should we? We know what we want. Let's not waste time being cautious when we could be building our life together. Winter it is, then. Though your father might have opinions about rushing things. My father will understand. He did exactly the same thing with my mother, married her 3 months after they met because they were sure. She kissed him again, quick and joyful. We're sure too, aren't we? Absolutely certain. They walked to the house hand in hand, and Martha took one look at their faces and burst into happy tears. Finally, I've been waiting for you to make this official. Let me see the ring. She examined it with approval, declared it perfect, then immediately began planning. We'll need to organize a wedding. Nothing too fancy, you're both too practical for that, but proper, at the church, with the whole county there to see that this is real and right. When were you thinking? December, Cole said, before Christmas, if that's possible. December. Martha's eyes widened. That's less than 2 months away. Then we'd better get started planning, Evelyn said, laughing at Martha's expression. Unless you think we should wait? Absolutely not. I've watched you two dance around this long enough. If you want a December wedding, you'll have a December wedding, and it'll be beautiful if I have to drag every woman in the county in to help. Martha's smile was wide and genuine. Oh, this is wonderful, truly wonderful. Sarah would be so happy for you, Cole. She'd love Evelyn. The mention of Sarah didn't hurt the way it once might have. Instead, Cole felt a bittersweet warmth, a sense that Martha was right, that Sarah would approve, would be glad he'd found love again, would like the strong, brave woman who'd captured his heart. I think she would, he agreed quietly. I think she'd be glad I'm not alone anymore. The next morning, they rode to the Grant Ranch to share the news. Henry took one look at Evelyn's glowing face and the ring on her finger and started laughing. 2 months, he said, shaking his head. Your mother and I waited 3. I suppose you're determined to outdo us in impulsiveness. Is that your way of saying congratulations? Evelyn asked, though she was smiling. That's my way of saying I saw this coming from the moment you two rode into my yard looking at each other like you'd discovered something precious. Henry pulled her into a hug. Congratulations, daughter. You've chosen well. Better than I dared hope when you rode out into that storm. To Cole, he extended his hand with warmth that had grown from tentative acceptance to genuine approval. Welcome to the family, son. Though I should warn you, Evelyn's every bit as stubborn as her mother was. You're in for an interesting life. I'm counting on it, sir. They spent the morning at the Grant Ranch, making plans and sharing stories and basking in Henry's obvious pleasure. He insisted on contributing to the wedding. I've been saving for this day since Evelyn was born, and I'll not be denied the joy of giving my daughter a proper celebration, and offered the use of his land for any guests who might need accommodation. Over the following weeks, the county mobilized with the particular efficiency of a community that loves a good wedding. Women gathered to sew Evelyn's dress, simple but elegant, in cream-colored silk that Martha proclaimed perfect. Men helped Cole make improvements to the ranch house, adding space and fixing small problems in preparation for Evelyn becoming permanent mistress of the home. The church was reserved, the minister consulted, invitations sent to every ranch and family within 50 miles. Through it all, Evelyn and Cole worked side by side, building their future in both practical and emotional terms. The burned section of the south pasture was cleared and prepared for spring planting. Fences were mended and reinforced. They bought 3 new breeding cows with Henry's wedding gift, an investment in the ranch's future. And every evening they sat on their porch and talked about dreams and plans and the life they were creating together. Are you scared? Cole asked one night, less than a week before the wedding. Having second thoughts about tying yourself to a struggling rancher with more debts than assets? Not even a little bit. Evelyn took his hand, lacing their fingers together. I'm not marrying your assets, Cole. I'm marrying you. Everything that comes with you, the struggles and the triumphs and the ordinary days in between, that's what I want. That's what I choose. I love you, he said, simple and true. I don't say it enough, but I do. Completely. More than I thought possible. I know. You show me every day in 100 small ways. She leaned her head on his shoulder. And I love you too. So much that sometimes I can't believe this is real, that I get to build a life with you. The wedding day arrived with crisp, clear weather. Winter coming on, but not yet harsh. The sky that particular shade of blue that seems possible only in Montana. The church was packed with neighbors and friends, everyone eager to witness the union of Henry Grant's daughter and Cole Maddox, the story of which had already become county legend. Evelyn walked down the aisle on her father's arm, wearing the dress the women had made, and her mother's locket at her throat. Her limp was completely gone now, healed as Cole had promised it would be. She moved with confidence and grace, her eyes locked on the man waiting for her at the altar. Cole stood tall in his best suit, his injured arm finally free of bandages, though a scar would always mark where Evelyn had stitched him back together. To him, that scar was a badge of honor, physical proof of the day he'd learned that accepting help wasn't weakness, that vulnerability could be strength, that letting someone in didn't mean losing yourself. Martha sat in the front row, dabbing at her eyes with a handkerchief and beaming with undisguised pride. Beside her, Tommy and Hanson and the rest of Cole's crew sat in their Sunday best, grinning like they'd personally arranged the match. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. The minister spoke of partnership and commitment, of storms weathered together and joys shared. When it came time for vows, Cole and Evelyn spoke the traditional words, but everyone present heard the deeper promises beneath them, to face whatever came together, to build something lasting, to honor the strange and beautiful way they'd been brought together. "You may kiss your bride," the minister said, and Cole did, thoroughly and without hesitation, to the sound of cheers and laughter from the assembled community. They emerged from the church as Mr. and Mrs. Maddox, and if Evelyn noticed that several women were crying or that even some of the men looked suspiciously misty-eyed, she said nothing. This story, their story, had touched something in the county's collective heart. The idea that love could strike like lightning, that healing was possible after loss, that courage and determination could build something beautiful from nothing. The reception was held at the Grant Ranch, in the big barn that had been cleaned and decorated with winter greenery and lanterns. There was food and music and dancing, and at some point Henry stood up to give a toast that made everyone laugh and cry in equal measure. "To my daughter," he said, raising his glass, "who has always known her own mind and followed her own path, and to her husband, who had the wisdom to recognize something precious when he found it. May you face your storms together and find shelter in each other. May you build something that lasts not just your lifetime, but generations. And may you never forget that the best things in life often come disguised as disasters, like falling off a horse in a thunderstorm." Everyone drank to that, and then Cole stood to offer his own toast. "To Evelyn," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the barn, "who rode into my life when I needed saving and somehow convinced me I was worth saving, who saw past my broken places to something worth loving, who promised to stand beside me through fire and flood and whatever else Montana throws at us. You're the bravest person I know, and I'm honored beyond measure that you chose me. I promise to spend every day earning that choice." They danced their first dance as husband and wife to a fiddle tune that was sweet and just slightly melancholy, the way the best Montana music always was. Cole held Evelyn close, his cheek pressed against her hair, and felt a peace settle into his bones that he'd thought lost forever. "Happy?" he murmured against her ear. "Beyond words," she answered. "You kept your promise, Cole Maddox. I wrote again, and now we'll ride together for the rest of our lives. That's a promise I intend to keep, every single day." As the night wore on and the celebration continued around them, they slipped away for a moment of privacy. Outside the barn, the stars were brilliant in the winter sky, countless and eternal. They stood together in the cold, Evelyn wrapped in Cole's arms, both of them looking up at the vast Montana night. "Do you ever think about that storm?" Evelyn asked, "about what would have happened if you hadn't been riding that trail at exactly that moment?" "All the time. And I thank God for it every single day." Cole tightened his arms around her. "Though I like to think we would have found each other somehow. Maybe not as dramatically, but eventually. Some things are just meant to be." "You believe in fate now? The Stoic philosopher who preaches about controlling only what you can control? I believe that sometimes the universe puts people in each other's paths for a reason. What they do with that opportunity, whether they're brave enough to seize it, that's where free will comes in. We chose this, Evelyn. We chose each other. That makes it more powerful than fate ever could." She turned in his arms to face him, her hands framing his face. "I choose you. Today, tomorrow, for all the tomorrows we get, through storms and fires and calm days and everything in between. I choose you, Cole. And I choose you. Always." They kissed there under the Montana stars, two people who'd found each other in the chaos of a storm and built something extraordinary from that chance meeting. Behind them, music and laughter spilled from the barn. Ahead of them, their ranch waited, land scarred by fire but healing, pastures ready for spring, a home they would fill with love and possibly, someday, with children who would grow up hearing the story of how their parents met. It was the beginning of their story, really. The storm had been the opening chapter, dramatic and intense. But the real story, the one that would unfold over decades, would be quieter. Daily choices to love and support and challenge each other. Mornings riding out to check fences together, Evenings on that porch, still talking after years of marriage like they'd never run out of words. Hard times when the ranch struggled and they'd have to make difficult decisions. Good times when the cattle were fat and the grass was green and they could look at what they'd built with pride. But that night, as they stood beneath the stars and celebrated with their community, none of that mattered. What mattered was the promise they'd made, the love they'd found, and the absolute certainty that whatever came next, they would face it together. Cole had promised Evelyn she'd ride again, and she had. But more than that, they'd both learned to ride toward something instead of away from it, toward hope instead of fear, toward connection instead of isolation, toward a future bright with possibility instead of haunted by loss. And as they walked back into the barn hand in hand, ready to rejoin their celebration, they carried with them the knowledge that sometimes the best things in life begin with falling. As long as there's someone brave enough to catch you, help you up, and promise that together you'll ride again. The storm had passed, the fire had been conquered, and in their place something beautiful had taken root. Love that would grow stronger with each passing season, a partnership that would weather whatever storms still lay ahead, and a home built not just of wood and land, but of trust and courage, and the simple promise to keep showing up for each other, day after day, for all the days they were given. That was the real promise. Not just that she would ride again, but that they would ride together, partners in all things for the rest of their lives. And they did.